Okay,
people
great.
don't know.
Yeah. All right. Why don't we start? Yeah.
Okay. So I sorry, just
Sure.
to let you know, I'm going to be kind of in and out. I have a trip tomorrow, so I'll just be packing and getting ready and
Sure.
so I may not
listening with one ear.
full listening with one ear.
Sure.
Like what was your last time?
And practicing while
you are packing.
self-inquiry while I'm packing.
Yeah, you were doing last time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So when
We need
yeah,
your
that's
questions,
it.
Ulla.
When
We
Swamiji,
need your questions.
my questions,
Yeah.
அது வரும் அடிக்கடி I'll come pop in and ask a question and go. Okay, thank you. Thank you
Sure.
for
No problem.
taking my
Of course. Thank you. All right. Let's begin this. I'll just unmute myself. All right. Welcome to today's workshop. Let's just all start with 5 minutes of silence. One thing I want to start with is just to emphasize something which I think I've covered a little bit over the last few days, but I think it's extremely helpful to really reflect on a couple of things that are quite evident even without having attained, moksha or liberation. And one is our total lack of free will. Our total lack of free will. That is clearly the case because our thoughts come from somewhere else, our situation comes from somewhere else, our emotions come from somewhere else. We take credit for all of them. So if we really examine that very carefully, right, every moment, the decision we're taking at that moment, the place our attention is at that moment, is not chosen by what we think of as ourselves. That's a hugely disruptive thought if you really allow it in. And it's hugely conducive to the spiritual search because if you really admit the lack of free will, if you really allow its disturbing implications in, then the mind is going to go slack automatically because you realize you're paralyzed in some sense. What you think of as you is not in control. So the mind stops. Really, if you allow that in, the mind stops. This is automatic surrender, basically. But the problem is, it's very, very hard to really allow that full realization in, of reflecting on that fact. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And the other thing is, along the same lines, is to really see what is the problem that we are trying to solve in self-inquiry, right? What is really going on, right? It's really very simple, which is right here, we have this thing called self-awareness. We seem to be self-aware. We seem to be aware of our own status as observers. And we use that word I to organize our entire life, assuming that it refers somehow to us, right? But when we actually look for what that observer consists of, it immediately becomes maddeningly elusive. And that too is a very disturbing thought. Because we're really living our entire lives on the basis that we know who we are, and if we really, really, really bring in this simple truth that by examination we don't know who we are, then it throws everything into disarray. And that, again, leads to surrender, it leads to inquiry, because then we want to know, who am I then? There is, we are in, essentially, I don't know how many are familiar with the classic American TV show, The Twilight Zone, but we are in the Twilight Zone. There is something very strange going on. There's something very odd going on. There's a huge blind spot at the center of our experience, which we ignore, because it's inconvenient not to ignore it, basically. And so a lot of the motivation, I think, for the spiritual search is really seeing the uncanny strangeness that is in our ordinary experience and letting that wash over us. Because we sort of flatten things out and make things out to be normal, but actually there's something very, very strange going on. So, with those two comments, I want to do what I've done before and sort of, let's start by opening it up and asking you all if you've had any experiences with surrender or inquiry or the search over the last few days that you have questions about. Let's start with that. Yeah.
Before that, can you explain the first part, first question, first comment you said?
The free will?
Yeah, one more time.
Sure. So I mean, basically, so what do we do? We think we have the ability to make decisions, right? But the very thoughts that are coming to us about what decisions we're even making, right? So for example, right, we organize our life in a certain way, like, oh yeah, well, I'm supposed to do this, I want to do that, I'm thinking about whether I should do this or that, right? Those thoughts, where do those thoughts come from? We don't know, right? You don't know where your next thought is coming from. And that's been the case since you were born, basically, right? So at every moment, you don't know where there's a script somewhere, but you're not the one creating the script. It's being read to you, and that's true of your thoughts and your emotions, right? And your decisions are based on your thoughts and your emotions. So your decisions follow from those, right? So your decisions aren't yours. The decisions are coming from that other place. That's it. That's it. So where are you in the situation then? How are you deciding is the question. In what way are you deciding? When you don't create those things, you don't create the thoughts, you don't create the emotions, and you don't create this outside situations, obviously, either.
Yeah.
And this has been the case since you were born, and probably, of course, before that, but let's start with birth, So where is the room for choice, exactly? But yet we act as if we have a choice, huh? Go ahead.
Just a little clarification that I needed, Akilesh. So, with respect to actions, right, often it's mentioned, hey, you have to take yogic actions with the help of the intellect, which will let the mind turn away from the senses back to the self.
Yeah.
So it almost seems like the intellect has some free will to, because it said the self is the boss of the mind, and the intellect is the boss of the mind, and the mind is the boss of the senses. So therefore, use your intellect to turn the mind towards the self is what the Gita says. How do we reconcile that with this free will thing?
Right,
is
right,
there
right.
free will there,
Well,
or is that also an illusion?
No. I mean, well, ultimately it's also an illusion for sure, right? It's we provisionally say, basically, look, you feel like you have some kind of decision-making power, okay? Even though, if you think about it, it really makes no sense whatsoever that you do. And so, to the extent that you feel as if you have such decision-making power, apply that so-called decision-making power in this so-called way. It's a provisional understanding, but really it doesn't make any sense. And if you really reflect on, like I say, if you really, really reflect on this lack of free will, it is the practice of surrender in a way, because it's not that you have to not act, it's that you cannot act. You are not acting currently. It's impossible for you to act, actually. You're not the one in charge even right now, right? That's really what's going on, right? So if you really take that in, then the mind is like, yeah, but right, all your thoughts are based on the sense of I am going to decide, basically, right? All the thoughts are vibrating on that, basically. So so if you really take that in, then suddenly the mind is like it can't move. It doesn't know what does it mean now. It's totally unable to. Anyways, that's surrender, basically.
Yeah.
Sorry.
A more basic question.
Yeah, tell me.
When you say you don't have free will, which you are you referring to?
Yeah, right. Well, whatever.
Misidentified you or the
you that you feel like, whatever feels like you, feels like you, right? The quote unquote, big self, whatever that is, may be in control, but that's not what you feel like, and so we can't say that we are that's not relevant to our immediate experience. The point is, what you feel like now is an individual. That individual is clearly not in control, And again, right, if you look in the Gita, the same thing is said, right? I just love this passage, right? It's so true. Right? Arjuna is like, why should I fight, right? And then Krishna, of course, says, this is why you should fight, blah, blah, blah. The self gives a whole Gita, right? And at the end, right, what does Krishna say? He says, if you think you're not going to fight, you're just deluding yourself. Because the reality is, you will be forced to fight by your own nature. And he says, very clearly, he says, the universe is like a machine. It's a giant machine, and you're just a piece of that machine. And that machine is operated by God. You have no real control over it. Well, so what's happened in the whole Gita then? It's basically been theater, right? Pure theater. In a movie or in a play or whatever it is, or in a novel, right? A character says, I'm really thinking, what should I do? What should I do? I mean, do they really have any control over what they do? No, it's the script. It's in the script. What they're going to do. It's pretend thinking, right? As if they really are deliberating, but they don't have any control. They are the product of whatever it is that has control. So, yeah.
So are you saying, I understand the part of the thoughts are not ours,
Yes.
the decisions are not ours.
Yes.
And you mentioned, referring to the Gita, that this entire script, is already there.
Yeah.
You can assume that it's
Yes.
there already there.
Yes.
And you are just trying to pretend that you are taking the actions, but you are not taking the actions.
Mm-hmm.
But the best way is to surrender, just sit back and observe, because anyway your decision doesn't have any impact because the script is already there.
That's correct.
So that's kind of surrender, correct? But again, it is the ego is coming back and clashing.
Yes.
I am trying to
Yes.
make the decision and trying to act upon.
Yes.
But here is the the self inquiry. I understand the surrender part.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But here, who is this I observing, in this entire thing? Okay,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is it Atma, or is it a non-duality comes into the picture where you are part of, you create the script? That can be an observation too, correct?
Yeah, well, right. We're not looking for that kind of concept. So when we're doing self-inquiry, we're not looking for another concept. What we're looking for is, we seem to have the direct knowing of ourselves as the observer, right? When I say direct knowing, what I mean is something analogous to, not the same as, but analogous to, right? You're tasting something, right? So I say, what does a strawberry taste like? You don't need to give me the chemical definition of a strawberry, right? The point is, there's something in your experience. You attend to that experience. What does it taste like? Well, now you're trying to focus on what the strawberry tastes like. Oh yeah, it tastes like a strawberry. But so that attentional thing, right? So similarly, we seem to have this direct knowing of our own beingness, here-ness, presence, awareness, observation, call it what you want, right? There's all the stuff we're seeing and thinking and feeling, and then there's us somehow. We somehow know that we're not this stuff. We're watching this stuff in some way, but we're not this stuff, right? So that piece, the us, which is not the objects, what exactly is that? I mean, if you turn your attention towards that, just like you turn your attention towards the taste of a strawberry, what are you turning your attention towards? And if you try to locate what it is that you're turning your attention towards, you'll find there's some difficulties locating it. But you have to keep hunting. That's the idea of inquiry. Does that make sense? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that we don't have any free will, and is that all because there is no script, or there is nothing actually?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's another way of looking at it. Sure. I mean, we don't have any free will in many senses and from many different viewpoints. My point is simply this, that, you don't need a great transcendental realization to digest the fact that we don't really have free will. And if you really digest that fact, then it's going to be extremely disruptive and conducive to the spiritual search. That's my point. Whether there's a script or not a script, the end analysis, script and no script, is really both concepts. So, the real truth is beyond whether there's a script or not a script. It's beyond free will and non-free will. But the point is, from our limited viewpoint, it's So there's different ways of talking about things, and they're all useful. So there's a so-called relative viewpoint, there's a so-called absolute viewpoint, and the absolute viewpoint is also just a viewpoint, actually. The real absolute viewpoint is not a viewpoint. So we have to be comfortable sort of moving between modes of talking about things, all of which are incomplete, basically.
But when you accept that you have no free will, it frees you up.
Yeah, of course. Hugely liberating. That's right. Exactly. Yes.
I feel like these are all like the free will, and these are all concepts that the mind is making up, right?
Yeah.
So, anyways, mind is playing games with its own mind, in a way.
Sure. Well, the mind is.
So that is like a different story going on in itself, but otherwise it's like self only, right?
Yeah. I mean, what do you mean by that exactly?
I don't know how to explain this, but this is something that I've been feeling since yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
That mind and everything, or whatever everything else is there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like lingering in itself, and it's just whatever. It's not even relevant, and it's just ourself and whatever it is that is only there, and just like these are all like our clouds on
Sure,
top, and
Sure.
and they don't actually have any substance in itself.
Yeah,
because
I
they
mean,
are
that's
like
true.
just made out of thin air without
Yeah.
anything.
Right. Sure. That's true. That's very
You
true.
surrendered them.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So you're surrendering those things. Right. Exactly.
So-
Correct.
So in the morning we were having a deep discussion about this. So what she's trying to say, and I had one question which I wanted to ask you today, is like we talked about there is no free will, then it's an illusion, and we are living in this illusion, and we are also not living actually to
Right.
be thinking on that also.
Right.
Not
in
living,
truth.
not dead.
In
It's
truth.
just the
Right.
self, right?
Yeah. Right. Well, in truth.
So
Right.
the question was,
Mhm.
which we couldn't answer together, even we thought about it. So when you are living in this illusion, and you are working and doing whatever in this illusion, and you have no free will, no action, nothing is there. Is all concepts only, which mind needs one anchor point to live on.
Sure.
Then how do we live this illusion? I know we are not living this also, but how do we go forward in this when you know the real truth is
It's not your
the
problem.
self.
It's not your problem to deal with. What universe will deal with it, right? It's not your problem to deal with. It's like asking again, like, when the movie characters realize they're just movie characters, how does the movie go on? Well, I mean, whatever the movie writer says, what the script writer says will happen. It's not your job in the audience to fix it. You can't fix it. I mean, whatever they're going to do is whatever they're going to do. Something will happen.
So in the end, I came up with this that it's just the body's intelligence or something. It will just do its own action. If in this illusion also, because we know the real truth, we understood like the real truth is the self.
Right.
It was all illusion all along from birth till now, or until
Okay.
we exist. So to live in this illusion, which you told that it's not in my job to do, but
Yeah, look,
so we just live like
No,
body's action to
Well,
do
no.
whatever it thinks of.
Really, what you're doing, of course, is through. I mean, look, to the extent that you're asking that question, okay, really, it's a very good example, right? Again, it shows how ingrained the illusion is, right? Because that question comes right back up. Yeah, but how do I actually live? Yeah, I understood this concept, but then how do I actually live? Which shows you haven't fully digested the concept, which is understandable, right? The answer is the practice, really, right? So the practice of inquiry or surrender, that's how you personally must apply this concept, because that's what it means to live by this concept, is surrender or inquiry.
And living as in, how do I deal with this? Like, for example, work.
Yes.
All this illusion, it was all along.
Yeah.
How do I do my actions? I know the actions are also not my actions.
Whatever actions need to be done are already being done without you. They've already, all this time have been being done without you, basically.
Everything is programmed.
Yeah.
No, you gave a best example, right? It's like we are part of the big machine, and that part is already defined its functionality.
Yeah.
But we are trying to figure out what is that part, that self-inquiry,
That's right.
and what is that function of that fun. I mean, even though we don't need to care about the function,
Sure.
But even to find out
It's
what
automatic, right?
yeah, automatically.
Yeah.
Because, but we need to find out what is that part in that bigger picture, in
Yeah.
the bigger machine.
You can think of it that way, yeah.
Yeah, that.
But then
But
there is
again,
no,
I have one point, right? Like,
Sure, go ahead.
so if that is written that way, even the thoughts that we are getting, isn't that part of the script?
Of course it is.
Yes.
Yes.
So the thought, like the movement, whatever
Yes.
this time you would be,
Yes.
Yes.
did not be even thinking about it. So
It is. Yeah.
I have a simple model that I use to answer these questions.
So-
Maybe right or wrong is think of there's a video game that's fully scripted that's playing itself, right? You're a game. You have you're a game character in it, and the video game is going to go on no matter what, right? The game character doesn't have free will. It's not influencing things. Things happen based on whatever the rules of the game are, and that's the outcome. And you are just a game character, as in the transaction thing. That's it. There's another model like similar to the play script. It's just a different version
right,
of that.
Right, that's right.
That
but
model.
when the character knows the real truth, then there is no juice left of playing that game.
But the game player knows the truth, but the game character doesn't.
so
That's what we are trying to
even
find out.
even if everything is already going by the script, right? Like so
Yeah.
what we are trying to do is we are trying to break that cycle. Is that what we are
No,
trying
no,
to do?
no. We're not. We're not.
Is
Trying
it
to,
also
we're
part
not trying
of
to break
the
that cycle. What we're trying to do is see. There's a concept that everything's going by the script, but the truth is not a concept, right? So what we're trying to do is really, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to experience the truth behind the concept. What is really happening, basically? What is really happening, right? When you surrender, we can't satisfy ourselves with any model, right? So we can say no free will, blah blah blah. We can have all kinds of philosophies, Vedantic philosophies or other philosophies. Those philosophies are motivational and they give you some framework, but they're not sufficient. What we actually want is direct experience, and the only way to get that direct experience is to, basically weaken the attachments and bring clarity to the mind. Now, you could say, of course, yeah, I mean, it's all. We don't have any free will to do that, and that's in some sense that's true. But nevertheless, what happens is everyone feels as if they have free will. So even though they may conceptually know it doesn't make any sense, the recommendation is use again the feeling that you have free will for this particular purpose, for the purpose of the practice. Because if you really, really, truly believed you didn't have free will, then you would fall automatically into profound surrender. So you wouldn't have to worry about this anymore. So the fact that you don't fall into profound surrender means that you don't really fully believe that you don't have free will. So you have to use what feels like your free will towards the practice of surrender or inquiry, basically.
But see, the intent is what he was asking. What are you doing then?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, to understand that we are only a player without any in the movie or in the script, is somebody controlling the thing. Once you understand that, and then once you realize that, as soon as you understand that, you will become free, totally free. Then you will realize, right?
Yeah. Well, if you really believe it is the thing, what happens is that people don't believe it fully. They might believe it for a second, but then what happens the habitual
Yes,
tendency of the mind will come right back.
As time goes by, so practically when your experience teaches you that you have no control.
Yeah.
Then as time goes by, you realize that you have no control, and then then you start to let go.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's right. But yeah, exactly. So there's a letting go process, right? Because what happens is the habitual tendency of the mind keep coming in with the old assumption of free will, but they're eroded over time. And if you apply yourself intensely to surrender or inquiry, then it'll speed up the process of erosion.
So
Yeah.
my question is still not, I feel it's not fully answered. Then, and so if someone knows the real self, the
Yeah.
truth,
Right.
that's the bliss, and it was all along illusion. How are you living in this illusion then? Like, how do you move forward from realizing that the truth is now this? How do you move forward with this truth
How does
illusion?
How
of
does
illusion?
who move forward is the question.
The character.
The character moves forward by the universe's will, as it always has done. You're thinking it's whose responsibility is it exactly? It's the universe's responsibility, right? Currently, it's the universe's responsibility. You keep thinking, I have something to do with it. Well, what will I do? When I get enlightened, what will happen? When you get enlightened, quote unquote, the you that thinks it's getting enlightened will no longer exist in the same way. So, you have a misconception about what you are. That's what it is. It's very, very hard for the mind to really fully understand what it means, right? For the I to be false. That's why we have to go through the practice so it can be directly experienced. Because the same thing, this question occurs. You see how the mind is reasserting the old assumption? It's like, yeah, I don't exist. But then once I realize I don't exist, what will I do then?
Yeah.
You see the paradox?
That's
Yeah, do you see the paradox? But do you see the paradox in the question? Yeah.
See, if I'm a yogi living in a cave or on a mountain, then it's easy to follow that precept, right? But for me as a householder, working in Silicon Valley, I gotta get up in the morning, brush my teeth, put on my clothes, go to work, earn my money, come back, all this, and this thing goes on and on, right?
Yeah.
So how do I then say there is no free will, right? So I'm just gonna let it go today. I'm not gonna maybe even wake up on time, or do all my stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
You try it, it won't work. Precisely. The thing is, because again, you have the misconception that you're currently in control, but you're not. The thing is, you're like, it's like, I get that I'm not in control, but if I let go, then everything will fall. Yeah. Well, clearly you think you're in control, right? Otherwise, how would it be the case that if you let everything go, it would fall? And even if it did fall, it wouldn't be your decision that it would fall. It would have fallen anyway, basically. In other words, the whole thing is not under your control.
And just like Apple's CEO died, it's still the company's running.
I'll give you a personal example. Like 2.5 years ago, I went through a very bad accident. And I was pulled out of the car. I was lying on the side of the highway, and I couldn't even move. And at that point, I realized it's like, it's not in my control. I'm just going to let it go and see what happens. And hopefully this is a movie or a nightmare and I wake up, right? And okay, somehow things happened and I'm here now, right? Listening to your beautiful talk. So, but the question is, you can't do that every day, right?
Well, why not?
Because
you're afraid. Because you're afraid. That's why. Because you're afraid. Because of the illusion of individual selfhood. That's why. But it's an illusion, and it can be discovered to be an illusion. But it feels I know it feels real. That's why it's an illusion. Because it feels as if if I let go, everything falls. That's exactly the feeling of doership. That's rooted in a very, very, very deep mental habit, basically. So if you want to unwind that, then one way or the other, you're going to have to start eroding that habit, from the outside in, essentially. Doing what you can, right? So self-inquiry and surrender are extremely demanding practices, but you do them when you can, and as has been mentioned several times over the last few days, if you can't do those, then you can do other things that are on the way to that. So for example, like karma yoga is a perfect example, right? So doing your duty, but trying to give up the results, basically. So that's a purifying practice. But eventually, when you hit, Maharishi's surrender or self-inquiry, you are directly challenging this illusion of control. And it does lead to fear. And that fear then has to be fed back into the practice. Meaning, so for example, right, who will brush their teeth and who will go to work, right? So this question, for example, if one is doing self-inquiry, has to be turned around so that we ask ourselves, who exactly is experiencing this fear of things going wrong? And then if you look at that, you're going to realize, I don't know. I don't know who is experiencing this fear. It's me, but what is me? It's something. I'm trying to find it, but when you try to look for it, you keep coming to objects that are not me. So that's why I say that's the first big, or one of the first two big profound disruptions is I don't know who I am. See, the whole caring about career and family and day-to-day routine, it's all premised about me, right? But again, if I don't know who me is, then why do I care? I mean, that's a huge thing, right? We all assume that we know who me is, but we don't.
Everybody did this. Won't society come to a stop?
Well, the answer is first of all, no, it'll never be the case everyone will do this. But secondly, no, because the reality is, the truth is that whatever is happening is again happening by God's will, or whatever you want to call it. It's not happening by individual will. That's exactly the point, right? Individual is not in control. So if God wants it that people will continue doing their activities, even if they have this so-called realization, then it shall continue that way. Individuals are fictions, basically. So fictions don't have control over what happens next. They never did. They never did.
I have one metaphor to share. That's what made me think, okay, come down in that way. So, like Akilesh said, that it's God's will, how the universe has to go, how that individual has to do, and all the actions. So one conceptual logic wise for brain to understand, because for example we work here and we work very hard towards one thing, still we fail, right? If we are working very hard, we know that our action should lead to a positive result, but it still doesn't lead to a positive result. It means that those results were not in my hand then who was controlling that? Then this profound action comes, that maybe the God's will is always there, who is controlling all your actions also and even the results also.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, sure.
That's
absolutely.
why, because it should be always one-to-one, right? I think I'm doing this, then I should get this. But it's never, I never get that thing also.
Right.
And
well, yes, there's a lot of
disrupts your logic that you are not doing the action then.
Right. People can say, oh yeah, you're contributing to it, right? Oh, you have some percentage of, people have all kinds of rationalizations. But again, if you just look at your mind very simply, again, you're not controlling your thoughts and emotions. As simple as that. And those control your decisions. So you're not making, right there, even forget result. Mm-hmm. Even forget result. Even just thinking like, oh, a memory came to mind, a desire came to mind, right? Oh, a regret came to mind. Like, why did they come to mind? Like, you didn't decide to make them come to mind. They just came to mind. And then we identified, oh yeah, I'm suddenly regretting this action that I took yesterday, or whatever it is, right? Or I'm suddenly obsessing about how this conversation will go tomorrow, or whatever, So these things are just coming up. They're just coming up. So you can see very clearly, you're not in control just from that. Yeah. I want to open it up, by the way, to anyone on Zoom who has any comments so far or questions.
I have one question.
Uh-huh.
So basically, my understanding is that we all have free will to do what we want, but what we don't control is the result or the result of that action. So we are in control of our actions, but we are not in control of the result of those actions. Is that wrong?
Well, yeah, technically it is. See, definitely we're not in control of the results. That's definitely true. But again, like I just said, right? If you really just look at your mind, right? All the stuff that's coming into your mind, all the internal stuff that's coming into your mind, and that is to say, the focus of your attention at any moment. Do you determine that? Are you determining your next thought? Can you look at your mind?
Thoughts come, but actions. I'm talking about the actions.
Yeah, sure. But how do you decide what your action is, right? What is your action decision based upon, precisely? Is it not based on your thoughts and emotions?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So the thoughts and emotions completely. Is there anything other than that determines your action? Like, is it not when you think about whether to decide whether to do something or not, right? Is it not ultimately some thought or feeling that determines you? Oh yeah, this feels right, and you do it.
Yeah, like someone was talking about brushing their teeth, right?
Right.
So if they decide not to brush their teeth for days and days, what the result would be.
Of
right?
course, yes.
So instead of just giving up, you do the best you can at this point of time, and leave the result to fate or God.
Well, that's karma yoga. That's karma yoga, what you're talking about. So,
yeah.
So I'm not disputing that that's a very useful practice. It is a very useful practice. I'm just pointing out that, truth be told, you don't really have control over any of that stuff. So now, it's interesting, right? Because again and again, right, there's the idea like, oh, well, if I recognize I don't have any free will, then I'll just stop brushing my teeth. But again, that's an assumption, right? It's an assumption based on the idea that you're in control. Right? It's only if you have control that if you stop doing something that something would happen, right?
I mean, you're not in control of your thoughts, but you're in control of your actions. That's what I'm talking about.
Well, I don't think that's, I think if you actually examine your actions, right, your actions are based on your thoughts. There's no other place for them to be coming from. Your thoughts and your emotions fully determine, situation, thoughts, emotions together, fully determine your actions. There's no other source of decision. Your decision is going to come from those elements. It's your thoughts that lay out the situation, right? There's an external situation, and then you think about that situation in certain ways, and then you lay out possible decisions. For example, brush my teeth or not brush my teeth. I mean, that's already a cultural thing, right? Some cultures don't have brushing teeth, right? Some times in human history didn't have brushing teeth. This particular time, this particular situation, it becomes a decision to brush my teeth or not, right? And then, so your thinking is so conditioned in those terms, and then you have some emotion about it, or some habit, right? Like, oh yeah, it feels correct. I should brush my teeth. Yeah, this is good for me. If I don't brush my teeth, bad things will happen, right? So some kind of thought/emotion that then comes up and arises, and then you feel like brushing your teeth, and then you say, I decided to brush my teeth. But actually, that is that set of stuff, because you could easily imagine another situation where, maybe you feel a little depressed. You're like, I don't want to brush my teeth today, and then you don't, and it's really that emotion or thought that came up, right? Like, it's just too much trouble. I'll do it tonight. I'll do it tomorrow, right? You could easily have had that thought instead. And then you're like, I decided not to brush my teeth. No, your thought and emotions came up in a certain order, and they determined what the action is, and you take credit for it. Like, I made that decision, basically.
Yeah, so normally, you can put this to test also. You can say that I'm not going to work today.
Yeah.
Lie down there. Then some other thought sequence will come, then you will get up, get ready and rush to the work.
Yeah, 100%.
So you can easily, you can put a lot of these things to test.
Yeah, true.
Akhilesh told me, don't pay the mortgage. That is about 4 or 5 years. It's a real story. Then I said, who will pay? Then, even though he's an artist, you can say, as long as the money is there in the bank, it's going to go anyway, right?
No, I like the idea, but eventually you'll get thrown out of your house.
No. What will happen? Yeah, some thoughts will come. You get up and you pay the mortgage.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's clear, right? That's
No. The thought process happens. Because of the predetermined actions.
Yeah. Exactly right.
So
people think they can stand in the middle of the road and surrender, and they'll just let 18-wheeler truck roll them over. You just try that and see what happes, right? You will jump out of the road, right? Whether you like it or not. Something will seize you and force you off, unless you're suicidal, but that's a different issue, right? But for 99.9% of people, they'll rush off the road. They won't be able to stand there, right?
If they're supposed to die, they will die.
Right, if they're supposed to die, they'll die. That's right, exactly, yeah.
Even without their will.
Yeah, even without their will, exactly, correct.
Somebody else will push them before the truck.
Yeah, exactly.
One question.
Yeah, tell me.
So, you mentioned about the character in a play, right?
Yeah.
We being the characters. So, is the play also there or not? Or that's also an illusion? Because I'm always getting this feeling that the mind is playing games and it's creating its own story, and we are it's just like too jumbled and things are just going on there. So whatever you're saying that things are happening by itself, is it happening in the mind level?
Or what?
Or in the real level?
In the real level, there's nothing can be said to be happening. Nothing can be said not to be happening either. In the real level, there's no words, basically. So everything we say in these philosophical contexts is like a model or a metaphor or a map, right? It's not exactly correct. I could call it a play, I could call it a movie, I could call it a video game, I could call it a dream, right? I could call it hundreds of different things. And none of them are exactly true. So you have to realize that. What are they there for? They're there to motivate you, and they're there to give you they're there to educate your spiritual intuition. So you can get kind of some sense of what exactly is, what is the issue here, basically. But it's not exactly the issue. It's just a kind of vague approximation. So we shouldn't take them as absolutely, correct, basically. Any of these metaphors.
Yeah, but then overall it's also an illusion, right?
Yeah,
then
sure.
why are we even thinking about it?
Well, because there's a game called Seeking. That's why. So we're playing a game. It's absolutely. I should have said it before, right? We're playing a game, and that game is we're trying to find this thing called absolute truth, and trying to find something which will give us permanent satisfaction, and we'll try to find something that will transcend death, basically, and loss, and all the awful things in this world. So we're playing that game, and that game requires certain frameworks, basically. Even if it's the case that those frameworks, in the final analysis, will be shown to be false in some sense. But we need them provisionally. So, the Buddhists say, don't throw away the boat before you've crossed the ocean. So there's a certain distance these concepts and practices will take you. And then you can drop them later. They're irrelevant. But they take you a certain distance, basically.
Maybe one small add up on her question. So is this real? That's a simple question. This right now we are sitting here, we are learning. Is this real? If you know the real truth.
No. It's it's not real in the way that you think it's happening, but it's real in what it is. You see, it's real as the self. It's not real as it in the interpretation that you have in your mind.
If Ramana's answer is that if you're real, this is real.
Right.
If you're not real, this is not real.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
It's not very
So profound.
I wonder if I missed it.
Wait, ask him.
Didn't get it.
I mean, to the extent that you as an individual are real, right? Then this world is equally real, basically.
Oh.
Yeah.
Meaning this, if you feel the self, then you
You
feel
won't be
the
real.
self.
See, in the 30s, I think Japan, Korea war was going on, something like that. One guy was asking Maharshi, is Japan and Korea are fighting each other? Is it real or not real? Can you imagine if it is not there, then will they be? What did he answer? He said, first of all find out who you are, then you will know
exactly.
the war is there or not. You don't even know. You're not even there. You're in India asking the Japan Korea war.
Yeah, exactly.
So for me, I think
precisely
the surrender is much easier than inquiry.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because I know everything is not in my control.
Yeah.
And so I don't know whether that continuous surrender leads to figuring out I don't know at this point.
Yeah.
But I think for me it gives kind of comfort by surrendering, accepting.
Yeah.
Right. Thoughts are not mine, and outcoming actions out of thoughts are not mine. Okay. So that makes much easier practice of surrender than the inquiry.
Yeah. So I think the way it works is some people tend to be inclined towards surrender, and some people tend to be inclined towards inquiry. And most people end up doing some combination, some ratio of both,
No, I'm trying to do both, but...
No, I'm not saying you have to. You don't need to. Surrender is a complete path. Surrender will take you to the final destination, all by itself. You don't need inquiry at all. The issue is simply that you have to sustain surrender in a very vigilant manner, right? Completely, continuously keeping your attention, pulling your attention away from the changing phenomena of the world and your mind, basically. Defocusing, in other words, on all the things that are changing. So changing things are all the external perceptions, all the internal perceptions, all the thoughts, all the emotions, basically. And guarding that state, and guarding which is connected to it, guarding your willpower. So basically you're in a state of deliberate relaxation, right, at all times.
Not only that, what I am realizing is maybe it might not be complete. I don't need even to find out who I am when I completely surrender.
Right. So the point is, when you completely surrender, you're right. You're not necessarily worried about it. But I'm nevertheless pointing out that when you do surrender, you shall automatically, if you do surrender and you vigilantly surrender, then your attachments will be eventually eroded away, and there will be clarity at the end of that process.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else on Zoom have any comments right now?
Yeah, hi Krish, this is Parajit.
Sure.
Yeah, so one person I know this was like kind of a weird situation. When I woke up a couple of days, I felt that there was some force which was like moving me in two directions, one towards the body and one away from the body. And both times it seemed that the force moved me towards the body. I felt it because it's my mind moving these things. But I felt that some attachment is there towards the body. That's why my mind is like moving towards that.
Well, yeah, there's a huge attachment towards the body, you know?
Correct.
Yeah.
But I mean, think, like, but I felt sometimes when I did surrender, I felt that I couldn't even make a speech. Like, I used to go to Toastmasters where you used to make a speech.
Yeah.
And one time I kept on doing this practice, and somehow I felt like, okay, these words are coming from somewhere. I'm like, they're just coming somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. They are coming from somewhere. So is that, so you had a problem, or you didn't have a problem with that?
No, I didn't have a problem. Of course, with the normal life, sometimes it can be a problem because then you have to like wait for it to come and like that.
Well, you're worried, that's what it is, you see. So I mean, what happens is, again, right, I really think the truth is that, you know, the real problem, so-called problems in surrender vis-a-vis action happen because there's a continuing hidden assumption that you're in control, right? So therefore, because you really believe in your heart that I'm in control, then when you try to surrender, you know, there is, that belief is really what is the obstacle to action happening. And so what has to happen is you just have to keep surrendering the fears that arise. Oh, I'm going to drop everything, I'm not going to say anything, you're going to think I'm an idiot, right? Or whatever it is, right? You have to keep surrendering those emotions, right? Until by dint of that, well, you have to be willing. Basically, first of all, when you surrender, by as the name suggests, you have to be willing to allow any outcome to occur. And that includes that you're not going to say the thing. And they are going to laugh at you or think you're strange or whatever it is, right? And go, what's wrong with him? Why is he not talking? You know, when one is able to do that, you know, then eventually one will pass through, you know, the sort of eye of the needle, basically. You know, there's a kind of gap that one can pass through, and then action will take place by itself. The truth is, action's already taking place by itself, but it just doesn't seem like that's the case. So that seeming that it's not happening that way will be cut essentially if you can keep the surrender going. But yeah, I mean, it is scary, of course. That's what the attachments are. Attachments and identifications are premised on the idea that I'm an individual, I'm in control, I have certain fears and desires, and if I don't exert my control, then those fears and desires will fall, the fears will come true and the desires won't, basically. So yes, it has to be persisted in, basically. And then yeah, you can have these experiences like you mentioned of in Toastmasters, like this. The words are coming from somewhere. Yeah, exactly. The words are coming from somewhere. That's always the case. It never was not the case that the words were coming from somewhere else, basically. So, just we don't have faith in that. Essentially, it's the problem.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, more than that, when you live in a family, when you do this surrender, it's a bit of a challenge. Like, why are you not doing this action?
Right. Yeah, it's a big challenge. Yeah, because those are all attachments. You see. You're worried about, you're worried, right? So those attachments keep you bound.
Worrying about it. Sorry, my family is worried about it. So something comes up. I tell them everything is automatic. I believe that completely. And I feel that to some extent. I'm not like, I tell them like everything happens somehow. I don't know really. I can't really say that, okay, why did I say this phrase now? I don't know.
Yeah.
Just, it happened. So I tell them like, I have no control. Like it's like every day going to sleep and waking up. You have no control when you're going to sleep.
That's
you
right.
Just go to lie down. No idea when you're going to wake up or sleep, right?
Yes.
So tell them sometimes this relationships get challenging, but of course it's this practice is very good.
No. So but just to stop you right there. So what happens is, yeah, your family, let's say, objects, and that triggers certain things in you that it triggers uncomfortable emotions in you. So those uncomfortable emotions themselves have to be recognized as objects and surrendered, basically. You don't want to identify with them and say, oh yeah, this is really, you don't want to dwell and use your willpower, because basically that's what happens, right? That's an attachment. My family should see me as in a certain kind of way. I should be a dutiful, whatever it is, right? Husband or father or whatever it is, right? So, that's an attachment. So one has to recognize that in the moment, it's making me uncomfortable in a certain way, and then you surrender it or inquire into it. Who is it that has this fear, basically?
I inquire into it mostly.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Who's feeling that?
Yeah.
Feeling.
Yeah.
Feeling like bad feeling or good feeling, whatever feeling it is.
Exactly.
Yeah. So at that point, I go into kind of self-inquiry.
Okay. Great.
Till that point, I'm like, okay, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. I'm like in an automatic. Why should I even worry about it?
Yeah. Right. Just relax. Exactly. That's right. Precisely. That relaxation. The relaxation is, is even before any final point, very sweet. That relaxation is very liberating. It's very sweet by itself. If one really allows oneself to relax, it is its own reward immediately. So, yeah. Chiki, I think you had a question?
Yeah, it's related to this. So I have a similar experience where I'm accepting that everything's happening on its own, and sometimes it feels like the doer's gone. Like it actually, but then it comes back.
Yeah,
Is that just
that's right.
being triggered?
When the doer seems to be gone, that's essentially a kind of glimpse, right? So that's again a reflection of the self. That's a beautiful experience, and one must recognize that all such experiences are transient. So the key point is not to get attached to that experience, but rather, okay, well, it's gone. Well, now I'm annoyed. The doer's back.
Yeah.
That annoyance must itself be surrendered and inquired into.
But it's so annoying.
Yeah, it is annoying, but that's good. That annoyance is very motivational because the reason that glimpse goes away is because of remaining attachments. Right, so that's what pulls you back. What pulls you back is a part of yourself that does not want to be what it thinks is, murdered or killed or annihilated or something like that, right? It's afraid. It's afraid of being unwoven or unraveled or something like that, and losing all the things that are important to it. So that part pulls you back from clarity, basically. So you have to. When the thought of being pulled out of a beautiful state assaults you, you have to immediately feed that back into the practice, right? Who is it that just had that state, of divine bliss, right? Or surrender it, and redouble your efforts because again, it's a game of continuity. It's a game of intensity and continuity, right? How vigilantly can you keep these practices up, right? So the more you want it, the more intently you're going to do the practice, and that faster the attachments are going to wither as a result.
Yeah. And in your experience, when you're in that glimpsy state, to me, it's like, it feels like I'm in a play or a video game.
Sure.
Like.
Yeah, absolutely, sure, absolutely, yeah, exactly. It could feel exactly like that. And there are many different kinds of glimpses, but yes, this kind of like loss of doership kind of glimpse would be exactly like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, let's do some practice together. So, I would suggest pick surrender or inquiry. Does anyone not know the instructions for surrender or inquiry? Want me to repeat any of them right now? You do. Okay. So let me briefly explain both surrender and inquiry, and then you can practice them. So inquiry, I think I kind of already explained, which is basically this general, ordinary sense of your own existence, and what you're doing is you're trying to turn your attention towards that. You're looking for it. Okay. And as you look for it, wherever your attention turns, you ask yourself a question, and that question is, am I aware of this? Whatever it is. So for example, right, let's say you're looking for where you feel like you are or what that is, and you feel like, oh, I feel like I'm in my head or something like that, right? And then you ask yourself, well, this feeling in my head, is it something I'm aware of? And the answer is obviously yes. And therefore that can't be you. Why? Because if it were you, you wouldn't be able to experience it as something separate. What you are is experiencing the experiences. So there has to be a distance between you and the objects. So anything which is an object can't be you. So you're looking for what is experiencing that. And so you just repeat, well, where am I? Because again, you're in touch with, you're in contact with whatever this I is. So what is it that you're in contact with? You're just examining your own direct moment-to-moment feeling. Like, what is this feeling that I seem to exist? Why do I believe that? what is that? What is that feeling that I myself am currently feeling? The feeling that I'm feeling, what is that feeling, essentially, right? That's essentially what you're trying to do. And then surrender is, you're basically trying to withdraw your attention from everything, except the practice of surrender. So, when I say everything, I mean all thoughts, all emotions, everything in the world. You're not trying to push it out of awareness, you're just trying to not pay any of them like your specific core attention. They all are background, noise. You view them as irrelevant to me, illusion. And for that reason, you don't use your willpower on anything. Your personal willpower, whatever feels like my personal focus, I'm keeping that, hoarding that to myself. I'm refusing to focus or exert what feels like burdensome effort on anything. And you just relax, except for your constant, hypervigilant protection of that state by watching, guarding that relaxation. As soon as any thoughts come, you're immediately going to withdraw your attention from them. You're going to regard them as illusion, and you're not going to react to them as if they were real. So that's surrender. You just keep doing that, basically. Yeah, okay? So let's try that for 5 minutes together. Either one.
Studying feel like very boring because like I'm looking at things and it's not even relevant anymore. So it feels like super boring.
Yeah. So boredom is another thought. Notice that? Surrender to inquire into it. Exactly, that's right. Yes, because that's another thing, right? You'll be doing this, be like, yeah, what now?
Yeah,
It's gray, it's boring. Yeah, this is a thought.
I forgot about that.
That's okay. Yeah, exactly. That's good though. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happens, yeah.
So in the inquiry, what makes me, when I'm inquiring, I know that the body is not me.
Yeah.
And also I know that body is also not me.
Yeah.
What makes me to claim, that ego part, that this is my body and that's your body?
Well, a good question. What do you think makes you claim that? It's your sense. It's some kind of inner sense. It's grounded in that, basically.
But that's ego, correct?
Yeah, I mean, inquiry is looking at what the ego is, basically, right? Again, do you understand what I mean by the sense of being an observer?
Yeah.
Yeah, like it feels like you know that you're observing, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that sense, when inquiry, you're just trying to find what is the observer.
The observer is independent of this body and that body.
Well, that's just a concept. But you're experiencing the observer, right? Right. Directly. You know I'm observing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that experience, can you turn your attention towards that experience? Can you look at what that experience even is directly?
No.
You could try though, because you somehow know that you're observing. How do you know that?
Yeah, that's an experience too.
Yeah, but how do you know? What is that experience? So what inquiry is, this experience that I'm having of feeling like an observer, what is this experience? Like, I want to look at this experience. I want to feel into this experience that I myself am having, that is my every second experience of being an observer, right?
Yeah.
So what is that? That's what inquiry is. I'm trying to examine it. Like, I'm trying to turn my attention backwards. I'm trying to turn the camera backwards to look at the one who's the camera person, basically. Yeah. Yeah. Huh?
Today, when I was doing the surrender thing, I have no control over what I am. And then who we surrendering? You cannot even surrender anything. We don't even control of what.
Right. This
is the same like, when you don't have anything, try to take somebody's and give it to somebody else.
Yeah, right. No, look. So look, that part is a paradox. I agree. We're saying you have no free will, but do the practice. I think what you have to do is you have to accept that there is a little bit of a necessary paradox here. You have to accept that you do have free will to do the practice. You do it. Now, why is that the case?
You go that way. Right?
Yeah, you go that way. Because the reason that works is because the truth is the practice is in fact happening. You see, the practice is a description really of reality. It seems to be a separate.
More like a pretense.
It's a pretense. it's you're pretending to be what you are, what you actually are. That's really what it is. That it works because you are that.
There's an example they give, like, when they nothing to give as offering to God, they take you make the jaggery as a player, and keep it, and you would all the thing there is nothing to offer, so take a piece of the player and give it to
Yeah, exactly.
So they give that example.
Yeah, piece of God back to God. Exactly, beautiful, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So the thing is, that is exactly right? In reality, right, when one tries to surrender, right, and full surrender only happens with God's grace, but we can try our best to surrender as best we can, right, then eventually it is recognized that what we thought we were doing was not actually a separate action at all. Yes. So you understand that? Basically, the idea is that what these practices of it, because we have on the one hand, you have to maintain these. That's why I say being able to move between different models, right? Because on the one hand, I said, and it's true, you have no free will. But on the other hand, I'm saying, but do these practices, right? Continuously use self-inquiry or surrender. But if you have no free will, then how is it that you can do these things? Or how can you decide to do these things? It'll be done if God wills that you do them. Otherwise, it won't be done. I mean, that's true, actually. But nevertheless, I'm saying do them. It's because you feel that you have some degree of willpower, right? It's true. I'm telling you to use what the willpower that you think you have, that you feel you have, towards this practice. And secondly, these practices are themselves, they are very special in that they are actually, they seem to be separate actions that you're taking. They seem to be like, I'm doing this right now, like I'm surrendering right now. But the interesting thing about them is that they are actually, in a very profound sense, they are descriptions of the self. Even though the self cannot be described, but they're pretty good descriptions of the self in a certain way. Why? Because the self is effortless and ignoring, in some sense, all particular objects. The self is simply being. Okay, so it's glorious and radiant, and it doesn't do anything, and nor does it take cognizance of anything. So it is in perpetual surrender. It is surrender. It is surrender, basically, with the capital S. And similarly, right, exactly the same idea. With inquiry, one is looking for I. There's an arrow moving towards I and away from all the particular objects. Again, that sort of infinite arrow inward. That's the self. That's another description for the self. So what we're asking you to do in these practices is really, the truth be told, nothing other than what you already actually are. But it seems to be that you're doing something separate and artificial and this technique. That's what it seems to be from the perspective of the individual person, which is wrong, essentially, the wrong perspective. So yeah, that accounts for that. We're asking you to do something that you can do because you are that, and you are in fact doing it. And the truth is, you are the self, and that's the fact is you are the self. But it doesn't seem like you're the self. So the one who doesn't feel like they're the self yet, they are told to do this practice. And it's okay, because in fact, they are the self, actually, and the practice defines them, in truth. So this is the way the mind has to move, right? It's moving in this sort of, there's a kind of logic like this, right? Like you take a certain set of conclusions and then you undermine them. Like we agree to this extent, and then we see that's not exactly entirely true. This is a way of talking about the truth. The truth cannot be talked about directly. It's talked about elliptically, It's talked about, we talk around the truth in these ways. Yes, this, but not that, with something else, and it's not that something else, it's this sort of thing, and then, no, that's not quite true either, right? And we go in these spirals, basically, because we can't talk about it directly.
So when you say there is a free will is kind of needed to practice, okay? That's what.
Yeah, and you can say that you have the free will to practice. No other free will, just the free will to practice.
And, yeah, but at the same time, if I look back, okay, several years back, I never had this want of like practicing.
Correct.
But how that evolved? Like now again, it's part of the script.
Yeah. Obviously, it's part of the script. That's right.
because it looks very interesting because I was doing so many illusionary good or bad things. Okay, so I don't know whether this is good or bad. Again, that can be an illusion. Practicing all this, but how I evolved from that state to here, I don't know what made me to.
Right.
I mean, to pinpoint a particular, like, I say this particular experience made me to do these things, but I don't have those things, but it happened.
Yeah.
So is it like, but that lead to another question, the same family, okay? One person lead to this and another person lead to another path. Is that again a part, you have to assume that's part of the script?
Yeah, you can give a million explanations, right? They're all speculative, right? You can say it's karma from previous lives, you can say it's God's will, you can say many possible different things. I mean, people in the same family, lots of differences between
so
them. So
again, surrender, like there is no control, like, again,
sure, you can surrender.
There's no judgment of good or bad.
Exactly.
Just like,
you can surrender, absolutely, exactly. Yeah.
There are so many millions of people, why only 20 of us are assembled?
Right,
Yeah.
that's right. Exactly right. How are people's experiences on Zoom? Anyone want to share their experience of that 5 minutes on Zoom?
Illusion. Or boring.
No? Okay, it's okay. How was the actual meditative experience? Right? Anybody want to talk about that? Even if it's just these few minutes?
Relaxing.
Just relaxing, mentally relaxing.
Relaxing. You were doing surrender?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I was getting disturbed by the noise my wife was
making. Yeah, right.
And I told myself, surrender to that noise. It's okay.
Yeah.
That's how it's going to be.
And note, by the way, right? So, for example, suppose you feel irritation, right? Whatever it is. The irritation does not have to be suppressed, to be very clear, right? Irritation is just another emotion that itself can be surrendered. So you're not saying, I shouldn't feel irritated, that's bad. No, that's fine. Irritation is arising, just like everything else is arising. All your negative emotions all arise, anger, greed, whatever it may be, jealousy. So all those things, you don't have to push them aside and say, I'm wrong, I'm bad to feel this way. No, just withdraw your focus from them, that's all.
But I used your guidance that think about it as an illusion.
Yeah.
And then to me, I just treated the noise as an illusion.
Yeah, that's great.
And then I just said, okay.
Exactly.
It's an illusion, it'll go away.
Exactly. That's right. So just take your attention and don't permit it to be absorbed in any particular phenomenon, right? So the noise is there, right? Don't get lost in the noise, right? When you say it's an illusion, you are automatically doing that correctly because you're recognizing like it as a phenomenon rather than getting lost in it. So that's the whole deal with surrender. We're like continuously recognizing these are all phenomena. These are phenomena. These aren't real. These are like a light show, and treating it like that, But to stay in that requires continuous. Like re-concentration, right? That continuous attempt to stay in that view, basically.
So disturbance all in the mind only, right?
Sorry?
The disturbances are all in the mind only.
All in the mind. Yeah, exactly. Huh?
So what is the, I think I might be asking the same question again, but it's like, for example, if I want to actively listen to you.
Yes.
Right? And at that time, like we can, like, how is the surrender?
Well, you can't. So look, actively listening means you're identifying with the mind and the body, right? Mm-hmm. And well, when you say, if you're using your willpower, I'll put it that way. If you're using your willpower, like what feels like me is I am actively listening. Now you're identifying with the mind and the body in that moment, right? It's not the worst thing in the world. Maybe sometimes you need to do that, but if you surrender, you give up control. That doesn't mean, by the way, exactly that I'm not actively listening. What it means is that I am giving up the decision about whether active listening or not is happening, because I'm not the one making that decision. It's like again, your mind and body are 10 feet over there. That's another person. They're making the decision whether to actively listen or not. You're relaxing, and they're making the decision. They can actively listen, they cannot actively listen it. You're not saying they shouldn't actively listen. It's totally up to them. Let them do it. They'll handle it.
But listening without listening.
Right, exactly. That's right.
You're constantly reminding yourself that you don't have that willpower. It's just happening.
Yes.
You are listening.
Yes. You can say
not
listening or not listening is not your concern, basically. You're continuously saying, don't get deceived by the idea that I can do anything about the situation. My only duty is to relax what feels like me. Whatever feels like me, whatever feels like my focus, whatever feels like my effort, that I'm going to relax. And then everything else, which is spontaneous, anything else that happens despite that, I'm okay with. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen. Just like my heart keeps beating and I keep breathing, and just like thoughts keep coming and emotions keep coming and the situation keeps happening, that's fine. Whatever that is. I'm not saying it shouldn't happen, but sorry, 1 second here. Yeah. So that's the attitude you have. So it's delightful. Basically, you just relax. You're
Relax.
Since we are on this topic, I had this question for now. Since this is the end of the workshop, coming to end of. Since we are coming to the end also, how do we use this surrender and self-inquiry throughout our life? Maybe I want some advice or...
I mean, you just hold to it if you can. I mean, of course, there's a lot of other methods you can use if you cannot, right? So there's, as like I said before, right, these are very challenging methods, and, if you feel too afraid to use these methods in a certain situation, then you can fall to other methods which are easier, like karma yoga, which is very powerful, or like a number of other things, basically, that can link you to the spiritual in some way, So the idea is, hopefully, if you can, every moment you want something spiritual going on to the best extent of your ability, including just listening to something, for example, or thinking of God in some way. I mean, anything is better than nothing, right? But self-surrender and inquiry can be very difficult in certain situations. And also, of course, I've mentioned before, I'll mention again, right? If there are psychological or emotional things, then try to deal with those. There are various ways of dealing with them. But fundamentally, right? If one has the courage, which very few people do initially, right? I mean, it usually has to be built up over time, is the truth. But if one has the courage to hold to the practice, right? The practice is either practice, right? But it's just together one practice, really, is a universal solvent for everything. You can hold to it, and it requires nothing else. All other things will be taken care of for you. So
basically, once you do this practice, then the person will never have to worry about anything. There is no sadness. There is no happiness also.
Well, that's right. Well, sadness or you can say you can say it that way. You can say sadness and happiness may be in the background, but the point is that one is not identified with them. Yeah. So whatever they are, they may be there, but it's irrelevant to you. Yeah.
In practice, what you are going to see is that it's going to up and down. It's like a cyclical.
Yeah.
When you hit a brick wall, then sometimes you get dejected, then you ignore it for a while, then you come back again. That's my experience. It's up and down. It's never the same.
Changes,
so eventually you will go in because you're caught in this web. You are in this loop and you cannot escape.
Yeah. That's true. That's very true. I mean, that is what is said in the scriptures for sure, right? Once one embarks upon this path, and frankly, even having already listened to this, even for a few seconds, you've already embarked on the path. This is like, it's what the Buddhists call stream entry, right? So you will be carried to the ocean. It's just a matter of time. Yeah. So, you can't escape it. You will be carried eventually there. However, you can get there slower or faster. So there's the issue of motivation.
It's a boulder blocking you or something.
Exactly.
Maybe exactly. One small example you can give. If I am in a meeting room.
Yeah.
And everyone is talking, and that moment, I know it's not my action, but surrender starts.
Yeah.
How do that person deal in that situation?
Well, it's not going to be your decision. Yeah. It already is not your decision. That's the truth. Yeah.
All the answers come to the same point.
No, actually, Akilesh has asked me to say. I told him before once the mortgage example. When you're at work, it's easy to do this inquiry or surrender when you're walking outside. You're alone. Yeah. Nothing will happen, right? Yeah. He said, why don't you do it when you're in the office meeting?
Yeah.
I tried to do it, believe me. It worked. Actually, you relax, actually.
Yeah.
But I tried it because if the job goes away, what the heck? Nothing will happen to me because I am already at a stage of my career. It doesn't matter. So I could boldly take the decision to do that way. Otherwise, you won't. Right?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's much harder. It's much harder for
That's
sure.
still your attachment that.
The attachment is stopping us.
Yeah, the attachment is stopping.
I think in the end, it's the courage. In whatever situations you are in, if your courage. To do the surrender and inquiry all the time.
Surrender is more, that's why surrender is a little bit more faith, and the power of inquiry is to remind you, right? The power of inquiry is to remind you that why do I care about this work meeting, right? Because it's mine again, and again, who am I? Like, if I don't know who I am, why do I care? Right? That's the point.
The initial fear is that you may goof up. And you will be fired. That's a fear, right?
Yeah.
But actually, if you go this route of surrender, actually you do better. Correct. Believe it or not, you do better. That trust has to be there for you to go further. Yeah. Once you relax, you don't care about the outcome of that call also, because then you do better, because then intuition takes you the right way.
I mean, the other way to say is when you don't have these emotions, right, like my attachment, you will start see things as is. That's what. Then you can do the things much better. Relaxed state is nothing but seeing the things as is.
Yes.
I mean, you can say that if you like. Yeah.
Otherwise, you put your own emotion, filter to that, and it kinds of gives a kind of distortion.
Right. Yeah.
Correct.
But mind becomes very clear.
Exactly.
So that your intuition, your intelligence, it's not yours.
Yeah. Look, that is certainly the way.
If it's yours, then it's again wrong.
That is certainly the way it often happens. I will just caution you, right? Again,
you may screw up and lose your job.
That's right, exactly. So you have to be prepared for any possibility. That's what surrender means. If you want to see the clarity, then you have to be willing for anything to happen, including screwing up and losing your job. So otherwise you will lack the trust. See, it's like a those cartoon characters that where there's two cliffs and they're running after each other and they run across the cliff, right? And then halfway across in the air they look down. As soon as they look down, they fall, right? Before that, they were running across the air, right? Yeah. It's the same thing, right? As long as one is continuing to surrender, then somehow magic is happening. As soon as you're like, well, how is this happening? Then you fall.
Wow.
Yeah.
Heavy.
So profound.
There is a beautiful story of Sakshi Gopal, where this young man goes to bring Bhagwan Krishna from one of the temples, like
Puri.
He goes Puri, right?
Yeah.
And then Bhagwan says, "I will follow you as long as you don't turn back and look. And I will come with you all the way." Like, he wants Bhagwan to give witness to something that only Bhagwan knows, and everybody else in the town is blaming this guy for something he didn't do. So he brings Bhagwan and Krishna is following him, and then he just gets that doubt. Is he there? And
is he following me?
Yeah, and Bhagwan turns into stone. Right in that place. So I think it's analogous to.
It's very analogous. It's very analogous. The same mythology. The Greeks have a similar myth. Same myth has been done in several instantiations. The Greeks have a myth of forget who it is, Orpheus or somebody. He loses his wife to the underworld. Okay, and he goes to the underworld, which is basically Yama's domain, right? And wants her back, and somehow he negotiates to get her back, but on the condition that she's going to follow one step behind, and he can't look back, right? And of course, at one point he's hearing her footsteps behind him, and at some point he stops hearing her footsteps, right? And he's like, "Is she still following me?" And obviously he looks back, of course, and at that moment she's lost, right? Yeah. The same idea. Same idea.
Right. That's right. Sorry.
Yeah, tell me.
So he asks Bhagwan, "How will I know whether you're there or not?" He says, I'm wearing anklets, and you'll hear it. Right? But then when he's walking on sand, it muffles the
anklet sound. Exactly. That
is faith, right?
Yeah, that's faith. That's faith. That's exactly right.
When the practice doesn't feel like it's going right, there is a tendency to take back the will. Okay, now I'm going to take the reins back and I'm going to run the show. So that's when you lose it.
It's exactly right. Yes. Same thing, by the way, also in the Bible. Exact same kind of a story. There's Lot and his wife in the Old Testament where they're rescued from a city, where there's so many wicked people. So God is destroying the city, but these two are supposed to be righteous. So he says, I'll rescue you. You can walk to the next city or whatever it is, but on condition that you don't look back. Okay? Of course, one of them looks back. She gets turned into a pillar of salt, So all metaphors, obviously, right? They're all metaphors for this problem of trust. Exactly. That's right. That's right. So I mean, it's not the, again, you fall and then you rise up again. It's not like it's the end. It's the end forever, right? That's what it is.
Same, if you lose your job, so what? You get another job.
That's right.
That's a big deal.
That's right. That's
but
right.
if someone had to lose the job anyways, you lose even without kicking in the beginning.
Yes, you lose your job. That's exactly right. Yes.
It's good that you lose your job, you get a better job.
Exactly. And again, if you are really in the practice, then you are you're immune to whatever's going on around you. That's the point, right? You're ensconced. You are protected, basically. What are you protected in? You're protected in self, right? Actually, right? You don't necessarily fully recognize or understand what that is, maybe till much later. But as long as you're staying in the practice is your armor, basically. It doesn't matter what happens. That's the beauty of it, basically.
Can we put it in the other way? Lack of surrender leads to a lot of problems. The illusionary problems, like other problems we face.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you can say
because you don't.
And it leads to identification with them.
Is what it attached to the things we start judging, and we're not never letting go things So that attachment or holding can lead to a lot of I don't want to say self-created problem. It can be a part of the scripture, script, but it can lead to a negative.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I'll just caution you, right? I mean, yes, I think that's basically true. But I mean, I will just caution you, right? Again, right? Whatever the thoughts and actions are happening in the background, right? We never want to say, oh, because I'm surrendering, that means that I shouldn't be experiencing negative emotions.
Correct.
But that's the key.
But Ramana says that also. Yeah. Just because you surrender doesn't mean that everything will go right. As you want. Yeah. But he also says that whatever is happening is better for you because it's whatever happens, he may go through all the troubles in the long term. It's better for you.
Yeah, exactly.
But isn't there a time and place for surrender also? For example, Arjuna could have just surrendered and said, okay, I'm not going to fight.
He did surrender.
But then Krishna had to...
No, he made him, but he fought again. He said in the Bhagavad Gita...
Surrendered to Krishna, not to his feelings.
Sorry?
Arjuna did not surrender to his original feelings of despair, right?
No, he surrendered because initially he said, I won't fight because of all these valid reasons, right? Then he surrendered. Eventually, he said, I believe you, Lord Krishna, then whatever you are saying, I'm going to follow. That's what he ends it. Then Krishna says that whatever, whether you like it or not, you're going to do it anyway.
Exactly, that's right.
But there's a time and place for
But what you're talking about is, I want to clarify that point. Okay, so you're saying he didn't surrender to his initial feelings of despair. But that's not what surrender is. So surrender is, it's not that between these two options, Arjuna has fight or don't fight, right? And he feels like, let's say, not fighting, okay? Surrender doesn't mean, in this particular context, surrender does not mean don't fight. What surrender means is, technically speaking, right, one withdraws one's attention from the whole field of choices and relaxes one's willpower and then lets whatever is going to occur. So it's not making the decision to not fight. It is letting go of the decision-making authority, which is different. You see the difference? It's quite different.
How do you decide that? I mean, that requires discrimination.
No. You just relax, right? So whatever's happening, if you view it as, this has nothing to do with me. Oh, fight or not fight? This has nothing to do with me. It's not that I shouldn't fight. It's not that I should fight. It's that the decision has nothing to do with me. Whatever will happen, will happen. God will make the decision whether I should fight or not fight. That's surrender. That's different than saying, I feel like not fighting, therefore I shouldn't fight, because then you're occupying the role of the decision maker. Whereas surrender is saying, I'm not the decision maker. I'm relaxing and allowing whatever will happen to happen.
And how do you
You don't. You precisely don't, right? So the process is precisely that the decisions are not yours to make, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly the surrender point of view.
The illusion is that we are making a decision.
Correct. Yes. Correct. The decisions shall be made. They shall be made by whatever faculty controls everything. It is that power is already making the decisions. So one is simply acknowledging a fact that I'm not the decision maker. So I cannot choose how to decide this because I'm not the decision maker.
So the role I'm playing is doing the decision making. But or the role that I have adopted to play is making those decisions.
That's the role that people generally think that they are occupying, but it's not an accurate assessment of what they are. So when you surrender, what you're saying is, I'm acknowledging that I'm not really the decision maker.
So you have to go with the flow. You let go, and then if you are supposed to do it, you will do it. If you're not supposed to do it, you won't do it. The outcome could be independent of whether you are doing it or not doing it. So you have to really trust the system, whatever the system.
I know. See, I understand the confusion, right? Because the question is like, because the mind doesn't understand. It's like, if I'm not making the decision, then who's making the decision? That's exactly what it asks.
Instinctive
right?
driving us.
Because if I can step out and observe the decision-making process, as in, I can objectify the decision-making process, right?
Yeah.
So that's the unblending. And so you're saying just the decision is all getting made, it's all happening.
Yeah. I would go a little bit even more deeper than just observing the components of the decision-making process. Really what you're doing is you're relaxing your attention so that you're not really paying attention to any of these things at all. It's really more like you're not paying attention to anything, except the process of not paying attention. That you're paying attention to. So you are using your attention on that to make sure your attention doesn't wander into this field. This field is like a field of it's like a toxic field, right? The idea is you enter your attention there and suddenly you're going to be confronted with all these mazes, these insoluble problems. Like, how do I make these decisions? I don't have enough information, which is true, you don't, right? So you're trying your best to regard this is like a series of traps. The only way to win the game is not to play. So, you're trying not to play the game and then allow whatever happens to happen. And you're like, how will things happen? Things will happen. Whatever will happen, will happen. Whatever will happen into that situation.
So that means...
How does that map onto taking life as a play? Because there is also this concept of this Bhagwan's Leela.
Yeah.
We are part of Bhagwan's Leela.
Sure.
So how does your, this method of surrender inquiry map onto that?
I mean, it's perfectly compatible. You can say this is Bhagavan's Leela. You can say this is God's play, and God is making the decisions. God is playing all the roles, right? So all you need to do is relax. You don't even need to observe. Even the idea of observing it all is another thought in that mix. You can just relax. Your only goal is to relax. Relax your attention, relax. Relax your effort, relax your focus, relax. Except focus on that. That's the only thing you're focusing on. And everything else, God is playing, God is making everything happen. So that is Bhagavan's play.
Yeah, I mean, even in the Arjuna's, it's not Arjuna's decision to participate in the war or not.
Correct.
He has to fight, that's it. He cannot make any decision to not.
Correct. God will compel what he will do. That's correct. Exactly.
Do we have any human beings or examples who have followed this process and what happened, except Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi?
Of course, I mean, there's a whole series of enlightened people throughout history.
So many people are
there.
And they followed the...
Of course.
Nisargadatta Maharaj.
So, may I ask a personal question?
Thousands of people
We consider you as enlightened. What is your...
Yeah, so the same question always arises. That question cannot be answered because I'm not what I appear to be. That's the thing. So, when you see me, you seem to see a person, but that's not actually true. So, what is my experience? Well, who am I is the question. And if one asks that question, then the mind turns silent. Because
No, they're asking your advice. What should they do?
No, he asked me what is my personal experience. But my personal experience cannot be communicated, let's put it that way. Yeah.
I asked him back to get the answer. It's not describable.
No, the same way, I have another relative the same way. He will simply say, go with the flow. That is his advice to me. Simple as that. Go with the flow. Don't try to worry about things, and whatever happens. It's going to happen. You have to have that trust. Just go with the flow.
Yeah, it's again the same thing, meshing.
So,
yeah,
that's right. Akilesh, I think a lot of this surrender thing, right? It's actually also stated explicitly by the Bhagavad Gita, like you said. You mentioned one instance.
Yes.
There's another one, right? Chapter 3, 27th and 28th.
Tell me.
Actions are performed by modes of Prakriti.
Yeah.
But the ignorant person whose mind is deluded attaches doership to every action and thinks, I am the doer.
Exactly. That's
the
right.
knower of truth is well aware of the relationship between the gunas and the actions and remains neutral because he knows gunas are interacting with gunas.
Yeah, exactly.
Which means, your gunas are interacting with external gunas.
Yes.
And you're not doing it. So, I mean, I'm just saying it's also there in the Bhagavad Gita.
Even those gunas also all part of the play.
Gunas are in Prakriti.
That's
Prakriti.
That's right. Nature, you can say God is controlling it, you can say nature in the form of the gunas are controlling it. You can say what you like, but the important point is you're not controlling it. What you feel like you're not controlling it.
Ramana quotes Bhagavad Gita a number of times. He quotes Bhagavad Gita also. When an appropriate time comes, he will quote the Bhagavad Gita.
When you're studying the Bhagavad Gita, you have to reconcile this discussion, has to be revisited.
Well, no, it is there. Anyway, I can give you a few examples. I can go back and see what Ramana has said about what is mind and things like that. He has given that example also from Gita. Chapter 6 is all Jnana Yoga, right? There is 24, 25, 26. If you look at that, he quoted, Bhagavan has quoted the same 24 in a few days ago, last month, right, Gita? I forwarded that to Gita from the daily talk of Ramana Maharshi.
But is this inherently incompatible with Western thinking, which is all about free will?
You mean like Judeo-Christian ideas of free will? I mean, look, it's I would say, right, I think it's a very much big it depends, right? Because again, you could analogize it in a way to saying, just like I'm saying, even though you have no free will, you have the free will to do the practice. So similarly, you could say it's the same thing, even in Judeo-Christian tradition. What is free will? The relevant free will is to turn towards God or not to turn towards God. Yeah. That's the free will that's relevant, Yeah. Because even in Christian traditions, right, very often you very much have the idea of surrender. Like, let me kill my self-will and let God's will be done. Yeah. This is a surrender idea, basically. So one has the free will to do that, to drop one's assertion of individual control and let the universe control, let God control, basically.
I mean, the inshallah is sort of
same idea.
A lot of bad things get done in that name of
God. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of misunderstandings, is what it is. So, but people are not actually doing the practice of surrender the way that I'm describing it, right? They're using certain concepts and then mixing them with other things in a weird way, and then you have bad things. Bad things also get done, by the way, by a lot of secular people. So.
No, in the surrender there is no. I mean, in the doing bad thing, there is no surrender because you are taking the control, so there is no surrender there at all.
That's usually the case.
The entire colonization of the world, right? And jihad, right? They're all driven by this whole concept of let God's will be done.
The problem is
it's applied wrongly, right?
Yeah, it's applied wrongly is what I would.
It's all in delusion still. Yeah. So I think we should just focus on awakening because this discussion, because again, all this colonization, everything is happening within the illusion.
Yeah.
And so we can keep on dissecting it, but it's impossible to dissect the whole tree, right? So instead, it's probably just to follow the practice.
Yeah. Better to understand this basic personal question than to worry about the world, because
it's very complicated.
This very intimate thing that's us is not understood. Right? What were you gonna say?
No, I've been practicing this wherever it is self-inquiry or surrender. I'm seeing the glimpse of, that detachment and I'm able to do it, but sustaining after some time it is very hard.
Yeah.
Like that is, I think slowly.
It's natural. That's natural. Yeah. You just keep persisting. And again, you can as I mentioned, you can look at other factors, psychological factors, physical factors. But fundamentally, I mean, it's said in the Gita again, right? Arjuna says, man, it's so difficult to control the mind. He says as difficult as the wind. And Krishna says, yeah, it is difficult, but it's doable. All you have to do is persist, and eventually it shall come under control. So, yeah, it is difficult. It is difficult. It's definitely difficult.
And when there is a doubt in the process while you're doing it, what should one do?
Well, what kind of doubt is the question?
Like, okay, I've been doing it, but it's still not there. I know it's not my action. I know all that stuff, but
what's not there?
You're following this path.
Or whatever it is.
You're following this path. Bliss is not there, or maybe the outcome is not there, and then you have all these doubts in your mind.
I mean,
what should one do then?
Those are feelings and thoughts that themselves have to be fed back into the practice, right? So either they're surrendered, or you have to inquire into them. Who is it that has these feelings of dissatisfaction, right?
No, so Akilesh is coming for 4 years now, right, Akilesh?
Yeah.
So every year you guys can tell, you see the improvement over year, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Huge.
Great. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. No, the reason I bring up the Judeo-Christian interpretation of, I know it's a little disturbing, but Hindu society became passive over time because, we kind of have this inner self-reflection, practice, surrender, all this. It can lead to passivity, right? Enemy is staring you in the face and you go surrender.
But when Bhagavan says when the time comes, he will come to take care of your business.
No, I think he's got a point.
So that's why I always question this.
So
when do we practice surrender? It's
I think Murli, if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, for example, the surrender is to fight the war. So I mean, it's a little bit paradoxical.
That's exactly right.
You have to stay with that.
Precisely.
It's not as simple as surrendering to the enemy,
Surrender is not inaction.
There's a notion, exactly. That's right, precisely. I think the Gita says that.
It's not the literal meaning you surrender.
There's a belief, right? There's again, you see again and again, which is understandable, right? There's an underlying assumption of personal control. Like if I believe this, I'm going to behave passively. Because there's an assumption of personal control. But the whole point here is there's no personal control. You're saying this belief leads to passivity, but that's only true if one has personal control. India may have been passive, but for so many other reasons. It's not because of doing Ramana Maharshi's version of surrender, I assure you.
But if you believe that there is it's a little bit fatalistic to believe that there's a script being played out.
Yeah.
And no matter what I do, the outcome is going to be what it is.
Well,
then you don't do anything.
No, but that's not true. That's not true because you see, if it's all the script is written out, then whether you do something or not is in the script, right?
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's not you're saying like, oh, the script's written out, therefore why should I do anything?
You're thinking that you can control the script. No.
That's in the script whether or not you do something.
Right.
You see that?
But the general perception is that if you believe in fate and destiny, you won't do anything. That's not correct.
Yeah.
Ramana Rai said very clearly in one of the talks, he said that that's a totally wrong belief. Something will force you to do whatever you are supposed to do.
That's right.
Like yesterday he was telling mind and body has its own thing. It will take care of.
Yes.
But I think Murli's point about apathy that bred into the Indian subcontinent has to be also examined,
Yeah, I mean,
in light
it's
of the philosophy of the land. I mean, you have to see wherever the
yesterday you mentioned, right? Mind and body has got its own way of doing things. So it'll act on it, but you may not act on it, but your mind and body will.
Yeah, they'll act. See, the reality is, whether India is passive or not, the truth is, it's not in the control of the individual. That's my point. You're like, yeah, but this belief is a problem again and again and again. That's my point, right? So the point is, see, from a metaphysical perspective, what is it? This is a dream. Okay, so worrying about India's passivity is very secondary to recognizing what you are in the first place.
That's it.
Okay, that's the real
totally
point, right? So
we have own issues to solve before we
second one issues.
I mean, if we wake up to ourselves, maybe we will look at that problem very differently.
Today morning when I was doing my sadhana and I was meditating, doing the samadhi, so usually at that time I don't get any thoughts because my mind is just completely relaxed and I'm into a different state where I don't even know if I'm sleeping or not sleeping or that kind of a state.
Okay.
Right? But today I found my mind was automatically doing self-inquiry, but in the meditation.
Okay.
So I'm not sure like if this is.
I think.
I know I don't have control, but.
No. Well, what's the problem?
Because it feels a little weird because that doesn't usually happen, and I don't know if I should be aware that I know I don't have control, but if
No, it's
I
okay. You
should
can
try
assume
to
some control. Yeah, it's fine. Go ahead.
if I should even not try to have that during that time, or it should just the mind should be still.
I mean, if you can,
she's
if
following
you can,
a technique and the technique morphed itself.
Look, if you, I mean, from my perspective, if you can do self-inquiry all the time, do self-inquiry all the time. Anytime you can do self-inquiry is a plus, basically.
It's like doing self-inquiry half a day.
Yeah, right. Oh, right. Yeah, better, of course. Yeah, but better. Yeah, absolutely. We are half awake as it is, basically. So.
I do nothing.
Anyone on Zoom have any comments, by the way, and then we'll do another 5-minute meditation, if not.
Yeah, I mean, I just shared a link about the Karma Manga by Maharishi. I found it a very useful book. Whenever I have a doubt about some questions, intellectual questions, it's almost like Bhagavan says the same things, but it's a very nicely compiled book. It's a very small book, actually.
Okay.
And also Ashtavakra Gita. I don't know whether people have.
Yes.
What is the other one?
So he basically shared a link to some set of writings by Ramana on the path of karma, basically, and then the Ashtavakra Gita. Yeah, of course, it's a beautiful book. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I already listen to that before when I go to sleep or something, but sometimes some clarity comes up when I do that kind of listening. I know I've gone through that many, many times, but still it helps with the path of surrender and and also some clarity comes in when, I don't know, maybe it's like intellectual, but
no.
Still
it makes sense. I mean, these scriptures are there for a reason. They purify the mind, and they they are pointers. So they kind of touch the spiritual intuition. So that's why they're there. Yeah.
And the power of, I mean, somehow I only feel that when I read this, realize people's books.
Sure.
I don't feel that when I like intellectual dissertations don't really make that.
Yeah.
It just comes and goes.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, but with the power of this realized people, it's like definitely this teachings have the power, even though there's a like printed on paper and somehow it's.
No, you're right. Yeah. That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, I totally agree. So let's do 5 more minutes of meditation together. Yeah, pick surrender inquiry. It's like the keeper experience. On Zoom too. I'll offer to Zoom first. Anybody has any comments?
Yeah, I can say something. A desire came up, a pretty strong desire came up, and then obstacles came up, and then what it takes to fulfill that desire came up. So these are all thoughts that need to be surrendered, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yes. Precisely.
Yeah. And it's easier to surrender painful stuff than that, very tempting desire.
Yes, exactly. Very true. That's right. All the pleasures are much harder to surrender, as a general rule. Yes. All our fantasies, everything nice, are all difficult to surrender. Pain we want to get rid of anyway, so much easier to deal with. That's right.
Yeah, it's just the, like in mainstream, they're talking about, this limiting beliefs, but I was just, I don't think that's the way to go about this. It's like, I guess I just need to surrender because I really don't know.
No, I mean, if you keep surrendering, that's you don't need to know anything except surrender. In that sense, it's quite beautiful, you're right. I mean, life is impossible to navigate is the truth, right? And all you need to surrender. If you're willing to hold to that, it will carry you across.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, sorry. Sometimes when I do like these things, I kind of go into like a sleep-like state, and I'm sleeping or not sleeping, I don't know. When I come out, I don't know what it means. But I think sleep is an obstacle, I feel, to my practice.
Yeah, I mean, if you can, right, to notice any sleep or sleep-like states, and to try to keep your awareness, they're in a way just another thought. So if you can recognize that and keep your vigilance, right, in surrender or inquiry, and recognize this isn't just another thought, and don't become absorbed in it, that would be ideal. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that you can't sleep at night. You should sleep at night, but yeah, in this particular context, when these kinds of states come in, you should recognize them. This is a state. This is a thought. I'm withdrawing my attention from it, just like I'm withdrawing my attention from anything else, and defending the surrender that way. So yeah.
I think my sleep pattern has kind of changed also. Like I'm only able to sleep 4 hours, whatever happens, because in these meditations, I feel it's because of these meditations.
Okay, sure. Sure, I mean, people need different amounts of sleep, so if you need less, great.
Yeah, maybe I do. Yeah, I think I'm okay, but sometimes I feel like I wish I could sleep too.
More. Well, thank you. Anybody here?
I think a
Tell me.
Okay, withdrawing from the thoughts, okay, but you mentioned become an observer and experience the observer's feeling.
Yeah, I mean,
view.
Well, what I was saying with that was an inquiry. You already have the sense that you are the observer, right?
Yeah.
So that feeling that it's already there, even without doing the practice, that I'm observing. What inquiry is trying to focus on that feeling. Look for what that feeling is. Do you see what I'm saying? Like again, even without the practice, before the practice, an ordinary person, every person, they feel like I'm observing.
Yeah.
So inquiry is that sense of I am observing. Can I like pin that down? Can I turn my attention and focus on it? Like what is that exactly, that feeling? What is it made of? Because it's not, it's not any of our usual things. It's not, we're not seeing that feeling, we're not hearing it, we're not having words come up. That's not what tells us that feeling, right? Something else is there. Some other mode of knowing is involved. Like that's not our usual senses, that's not our usual thoughts, that's not our usual emotions. It's something that illuminates all of those things. Mm-hmm. And that we are, that's how we know we're observing. So what is that? That's self-inquiry is like trying to feel into that. What is that? What is that feeling? Like what am I feeling when I feel that I observe? What does that feel like? What is this knowledge? Like I'm trying to focus on it. I'm trying to put it in my in the foreground. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. But get that feeling.
Yeah, the feeling again, right? In your ordinary, like right now, right? You hear my voice, right? When you hear my voice, right, there's audio information that's coming, right, and maybe the image of me, but in addition to that, right, when you experience the audio and visual, you experience simultaneously the knowledge that you are separate from this information, the audio and visual.
It's merged with everything.
Yeah, exactly. So the experience has that two components, right? Like the experience has the audio-visual component, and it has the me component. That's like not the audio-visual. I know that I'm separate from this and that I'm observing. That piece of the experience, That's what you're trying to like hold, isolate, grasp, right? Just like, for example, right? Again, these are all metaphors, right? All paintings are painted on paper, right? So like they have a medium that they're on, right? So there's the painting, and then there's the underlying paper that it's on. So if you're trying, what if you're trying to like see the paper, feel the paper, basically, right? We normally look at the painting and we're like, there's the content of the painting, whatever the painting is depicting, okay? But then it's on some kind of like canvas or something, right? Some kind of paper, some kind of medium. It's on some kind of medium, right? So we're trying to observe the medium. Like in every experience, there's those two pieces. There's the particular changing components, which is like the foreground of the painting, and then there's the medium that it's in, which is separate, which is I'm the observer piece. So that part we don't normally We don't even know, we don't even think about it normally. And it's all, like you say, it's mixed in. It's mixed. That's the problem. It's mixed in with everything, exactly. Yeah. So we're trying to like unmix it and then look, what is this other piece? Because what is it made of? Like what is it in our, what is it actually? How do we know it? What is the experiential content of that part, you know?
So in addition to checking who is observing it, again, who is observing it, in addition to that, become an observer and feel how it is to be an observer.
Well, I wouldn't say you become an observer. I would say you already have the feeling that you're observing, right?
Nail down the
observer. This is the same thing. Yeah. These are not two separate things. Saying who's observing, and looking at the feeling of being the observer are identical. Because in both cases, they're both cases, what you're really trying to do is turn your attention to that aspect of your experience, which is the you part of the experience instead of the it part of the experience. There's like a you, a me, and there's it. I'm experiencing it, whatever it is. It is a multiplicity of things. All the thoughts, all the emotions, all the sensations. I am experiencing it. This is constant, always the case. So inquiry is, I understand the it part. That's pretty self-evident, clear, what it is. It's made of sound and sight and words in my head, images, okay? But the other part of it, that we already experience all the time, we're trying to, like, observe that part. Does that make sense?
It's stemming from your basic thought, kind of.
It
stems from that and you'd see inside everything.
Yes, exactly. It's a basic thought. Exactly.
It's not even one thought or anything, but the thoughts come and go.
Yes.
But the one which is stemming. And
yes. The base thing. There's a base thing, which is exactly just like the water within the fish, within which fish swim. It's the mirror upon which things are reflected. It's the light which illuminates things.
Yes.
It's the you can use hundreds of analogies like this. And we're looking for that. But the key point is, right? We're not looking for something which we don't have to do anything to get into some other kind of role. We're already feeling instantly. I'm observing. This is like part of every observation. Part of every observation is the sense I'm the observer. It's already there. The sense is there. It's there. It's already there. So the only question is, can we look at it closely and figure out what it is? What is this sense that I'm there as the observer?
So if I immerse in that, automatically everything else will weaken and
yes, exactly.
Nail it down further.
That's exactly right. And immersion, obviously, as you know, is a hunt because as you try to find what is this thing that feels like me, as opposed to the thing that feels like those outside pieces, then you encounter more and more pieces, basically, more and more feelings, more and more thoughts. All of these are not me, and yet still I must be here somewhere. Right? I'm feeling it because I'm observing those pieces. I'm observing my inability to find myself. I don't know where I am. I'm observing that too. And you're right there. You're illuminating that. So you have to you're right there. How is it, right? This is the point, right? You're right here. How do you not know where you are? You're right here. So what is the thing that's right here? Like, what is it? That's the inquiry.
Relinking the other things as well as being in that like stem thought inside.
Trying to
feel that stem.
You can say that exactly. Right? You can put it that way if you like. That's right.
And also that means you're really completely focused, immersed in it.
Right, but just recognize that whenever you think you're in that stem thought, the stem thought is not a thought really. It's going to be a direction. Okay, it's a series of thoughts. You're traveling across them towards the stem, right? You're hunting the stem. Where is the stem? All you see are masks. Where is the face? Right? The face must be there somewhere. I feel the face. But when I look for my face, all I see is a mask after mask after mask. How can that be? That's the question. But yes, so the immersion is hunting, the hunt for your own immediate experience of yourself.
So if you keep focusing on that, then everything will break and you won't see anything.
Yeah, I mean, you can put it that way, but I mean, you'll see what happens when you pursue it, right? The point is that it will yield, right? So what feels like you will show itself to be something quite different, which is what you actually are. What feels like you, which used to be conditioned by mind and body and memory and things like that, will show itself to be not that really. And it will show itself to be what it actually is, which is beyond all of that.
Say, your answer is typically like in one of the Upanishad, the student asks, what is body, what is mind, the teacher says that, okay, go and figure it out. He gradually finds to come back and ask the question again. You won't give the answer.
Right.
You have to find out.
Yeah. The final knowledge. See, it doesn't. It's. There's a reason it can't be talked about because the point is talking is in the mind. So the whole point is you're trying to exit the mind somehow. Yeah. So whatever's outside the mind, quote unquote, by definition cannot be talked about. I mean, we can talk about it, but it's going to be inaccurate, whatever we say.
So you point out on my past.
Sure.
Figuring it out once is not enough continuously.
Yeah, because you have not figured it out, right? That's the point.
What I mean is kind of understanding it, experiencing it, but being
but exactly.
Experience forever.
Yeah, exactly. See, the thing is, when you think you experience it, you have to. That is where you apply this question of, am I aware of this thing that I think I'm experiencing? Right? If you're aware of it, then that's not the observer. Right? So something is observing that. You're observing that. You're aware that you're observing that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there may be many things that you experience, right? As you're doing this, you may experience, like we know, peace, bliss, ecstasy, spaciousness, all kinds of things, right? Those are all objects, without exception. So, where is the experiencer? That's the question. And that's the question, right? It's so crazy that this is something which is so basic, which is so ordinary, like that you're experiencing all the time. But when you look for it, it's so evasive. Where is it? How can it be right in front of me but I can't see it? That's the riddle.
Yeah. At least you are in the right direction.
Yeah.
You can keep on
Yes.
going.
Yes.
That's all you.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
a lot of things are objects.
Yes. Yes.
Dig further.
Dig further.
Without
Exactly.
Without
Exactly. Without stopping.
bottleneck.
Yes. Exactly. That hunt will lead to clarity eventually. Yes.
I want to point out my childhood experience that I'm talking about, this self-inquiry. It is started from the memories of 6 or 7 years, Akilesh. Telugu, we used to speak in Telugu, and so it's I means Nenu. If somebody would call, sometimes when I think about Nenu, what am I doing or something like that, immediately there's a feeling that this is not body, there is something inside, that separation feeling I used to get. But I was not sure whom to ask that question and all that. But if somebody addressed me like Sridevi, are they addressing this body or something else? That I could remember at the age of 6 or 7 years. But there was no
nothing to build on that.
How to explore on that idea. Is it any? Now I'm familiar with around this technique. But what I'm asking is there is any term in psychology for this, or is it?
Well, I think of it as, these are little tiny miniature glimpses, right? I've talked to other people who had these as kids, right? They may not be into spirituality now, but they've had that sense, like, this is not me. They get that sense, actually,
I was not sure whom to ask also.
Yeah. Of course. People think they're crazy. People think that they're gonna.
Exactly.
But actually, there's the little spiritual intuition at work. Really, that's what that is. That is telling them this can't be right.
So it's not my body. There is something inside. What is that feeling? I used to think a lot about that. But again, I forgot down the road again.
That's important. But that's why you're here probably now, because it's, you see, it was a seed, and now it's grown. Yeah. Anyone else want to talk about their experience?
I have a question. So, when we talk about surrender, is it mostly about thinking that we don't have any control, we don't have any will? Is that part of it? Or like, for example, in this meditation, I was thinking, okay, I don't have any part of the will, so just relax, right? But then I saw something like interesting, like a beautiful tree, and then the attention, like, I mean, is it also withdrawing from all the attention?
Both. Yes, it is.
It's both the things
it's
together.
Both together. That's right. Exactly. Yes, it's both together. It's quieting the willpower and withdrawing the attention. So you can think of it as, there is like a, there is like an open flame, okay, that you're guarding from the wind, basically. So you're constantly looking at it in some sense. You're withdrawing your attention to protect this flame, basically. And you're relaxing your willpower in the process. Yeah. You can think of it that way. Okay, let's do another round. Oh, sorry, actually, Raj, you had a question, right?
No, I was just going to say that during the self-inquiry, for me, there was a barrage of thoughts today, just now when I practiced it. And I almost found it easier than to ask the question verbally, like, I discussed that with you earlier. So I actually asked, who are these thoughts occurring to?
Yeah.
So since you said it's okay to language it that way, I explicitly languaged it that way. And then I was able to go back and be able to ignore those thoughts.
Great. Perfect.
So I just wanted to share that helped me.
Okay,
to
great.
verbalize it when I needed to, rather than just hunting for it.
Yes. The words are there for a reason. They're absolutely there to help you. And eventually you may not need them, but if they're helpful, please use them. Yeah. That's why they're given.
And also, when I look at the current situation on the planet and then see all the worrisome things going on, then I tell myself again, they're all thoughts, and that for this practice, it does not matter. I don't have to figure it out. For this practice, all I have to say is, who is it that is getting all these thoughts about whether this policy is right or that policy is right? All that, let it be there. Let's table it. For this practice, all I want to do is to figure out who's having those thoughts and to discover the person to whom those thoughts are.
Exactly.
So it's not my problem what's happening. At least for this practice. Right?
Yes, exactly.
So I think
that's exactly right. Perfect. That's exactly right.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Okay. So let's do another round. 5 minutes. Zoom. Anyone? Maybe? Okay. Here.
I started liking self-inquiry more than surrender.
Great, no, that makes sense.
So much charm.
Just self-inquiry, huh? Great. No, I mean, it's very, it's a wonderful practice.
This time I did the self-inquiry only. But the same old problem, when you try to who is the experience and you focus on, thoughts will come in disorderly. Keep on pushing it out, and the whole idea of Eka Chintana is not working.
Right. You're not able to keep your mind one pointed, essentially. Yeah. I mean, it's purely a matter of practice. That's all it is,
Yeah. So you thought you were getting it, something else would disturb it.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's good, because that's still changing your mind, actually. It's burning the vasanas.
Yeah, I see.
Ramana says that these practices burn the vasanas by the basketful, basically. So
that's motivation.
Yeah.
For me, the concept of there is no free will is very disturbing.
Yeah. Good. That's what it's meant to be.
Because I'm not exposed to the teachings of the Ramana Maharishi. I said that in the beginning. I come from the framework of Advaita Vedanta. Very much Chaitanya Mission.
This is Advaita Vedanta.
Trying to relate to it. But then just exploring there is no such thing as free will concept.
But being a house owner, you should have realized that by this time.
The Bhagavad Gita is
true. So I've been last two self-inquiry sessions. I've been examining about definitely in my life I've been doing some things with the intention of getting to where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And some things have worked out, some things have not, right? And if there was no such thing as free will, was it all just karmic or playing out, my karma playing out and God and combination of that? Definitely the people around me influence that, right?
Yeah.
Like my wife plays a big role in the outcome of my life, and my children play a big role, and my relatives, immediate relatives, mother, brother, they play a big role too. So I don't know, I'm trying to, from a rational perspective with scientific training, I'm trying to put it in some sort of a mean free path concept, right? Where some aspects of free will seem to play out on a micro scale or maybe even on a shorter time scale, but then if I look at a longer time scale, it's very hard to predict what's going to happen. And maybe I started with a particular intention in mind, and it hasn't really played out that way, the way I thought. Okay, in that concept, I can understand in that framework that maybe it wasn't my free will, it was destined, it was the way it was, what was meant to be que sera sera, right? But then I'm also reflecting on overall as a society, right? Unless you have what differentiates us from animals, right? Human beings have emotions and values, and they build a society, civilization based on those values.
Sure.
If there were no such thing as free will, then we wouldn't have done that, right? Because free will is what has led to this point where we are.
Well, how do you have that doesn't follow?
Or was it all ordained by God or some intelligent design or organic Darwinian concepts?
Exactly. You could pick any of those, but it they could all generate that potentially,
So anyway, I'm just thinking aloud.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, look at a micro scale. I mean, these are all, I mean, get into elaborate philosophical debates about these things as people do, but just to give you I don't know why this is going to be totally tangential, really, but I'm gonna give in to my temptation and say it anyway, which is there's a famous set of experiments by this guy named Benjamin Libet. Have you heard about this guy? So he's a neuroscientist of some kind, and he did this experiment where people were supposed to press a button, okay, and they had some kind of fMRI or something hooked up to them, okay, and they were supposed to indicate also like when they made the decision to press the button. Either press the button or not. I think it's sort of either press the button or don't press the button, okay, and then they're asked when did you make the decision or something like that, okay? And essentially, my summary may not be perfect, but essentially, when they indicated they made the decision, okay, whatever that time was, the brain in the movement or non-movement sector lit up like significantly before the person said that they were aware of having made the decision. So it seems to be that the brain had already made the decision, and then the person later became conscious of, I made the decision. So these kinds of experiments are there too. With their meaning for philosophy is debated, but just to give you a micro scale idea, right? Even at a micro scale, even at an individual moment level, right? There really is no free will, but you can keep thinking about that.
They say that honeybees can detect in 0.2 seconds. They can make up their mind whether a flower is worth sitting on and drinking the nectar.
Yeah, no, exactly. No, right, exactly.
They don't quite understand what
intelligence is certainly there. That's for sure, right? Intelligence is certainly there, and some people want to redefine free will. Some philosophers have done this. I mean, this is really totally tangential, but I'll say it anyway. You can redefine free will as saying it's some kind of connection between your values and your actions. Okay, like that's free will. But that's not what most people think of when they think of free will. What they think of free will is, I could have done something differently. That's what they think of when they think of free will. Yeah, decision making, like I could have decided differently. Versus these philosophers say, no, free will is, if I have certain values and my life follows those values, then that's free will. But that's not what most people think of when free will. And the important point is, that's the relevant concept of free will that people use to live their ordinary life, is I can actually make a genuine choice. I can either do this, or I can do that, both options are open, or other third options or fourth options or fifth options are open, right? And I really have this choice. But again, if you really look at where your inclinations are coming from, where, first of all, where that choice, why am I looking at this set of choices, not that set of choices, you know? Why am I looking at this situation, not that situation, right? You can think of hundreds of different situations you could be thinking about, but you're thinking about this particular one. And then within this particular one, you're seeing the choices as A, B, C, and D, you know, instead of X, Y, Z, and A, or whatever it is, you know? So every moment, your mind is already categorized what's going on. Those categorizations, those choices, you didn't pick them. So how can you give yourself credit for free will, is the question. How can anyone give themselves credit? Like, the entire picture is coming from somewhere else, you know? So
but
where is the
you?
Where is the you in
you also have an
situation?
intuitive model that you built up through your life, right? And you've developed it and it's in your brain.
That model itself has been generated through the same process.
A lot of intuition.
Yeah, intuition and everything that came, you know, from the moment you were born, right? Like, you're being, you know, your genetic material, your situation, none of it can be credited to you.
Inside.
How things work inside, none of it is yours.
Yeah.
None of it is yours.
That's what neuroscience says.
Yeah.
By the way, neuroscience has already declared
Yeah, no free will.
It's only when we bring the soul element that there is a free will discussion.
Yeah. It's really ridiculous, right? I mean,
neuroscience already said there's no free will. It's a gigantic state machine.
Yeah, it has to be.
So that's why I don't judge a serial killer anymore, because I could have been that serial killer if I was plugged into that part of the state machine.
Right.
You start with the
No, not that's not situation. It's vasanas only determine your behavior.
Vasanas.
Not environment. Environment won't have that much.
No, I think you're missing the point. I'm just saying that there is a huge state machine. If I was born in a certain situation like this, take out vasanas and all that language. You're talking just about brain and neural networks. Okay. Right? Just sticking to that realm, if I was born in the same situation with the serial killer, subjected to the same sort of inputs throughout my life, my neurons were firing in a certain way, I happened to be put in certain situations where certain things happened, and then that thing fired an action, and then I did something.
So you're attributing all of them to neurons rather than vasanas.
No, I also know to talk about vasanas, but what I'm saying is, even if you stick to the realms of neuroscience, they are saying there's no free will. Now we can bring another discussion in with vasanas and karma and this and that. Yeah. But I'm just saying, sticking to the realms of neuroscience, which only deals with, they're saying there's no free will.
Astrology is based on
is the reaction to all these things.
Exactly.
Astrology is based on that. So you are right.
So basically, the point is all these different domains agree. No one has free will. Yeah. Everyone agrees.
Whether it's moon or you, and then your planetary position, right? So
that is astrology, but that's not science.
No, Raji, even to ask the question why you got exposed to those kind of situations is also like undetermined, correct? Like,
yes.
I mean, I understand from the onset of you born and exposed to those circumstances. Yes, your neurons work in a particular way, but even to
that is going out to the realms of this thing. I'm just talking about where things are at.
That's fair.
And I'm just saying you cannot judge. You use this as a tool to drop judgment. So now you no more feel very angry. You still have to punish a serial killer,
right?
But you don't. At the deepest level, you don't judge them anymore because you say I could have been that. So that's all I'm saying. So I'm still using it to my advantage.
Element of responsibility.
There is this tendency to
judge, right, and being outraged and all that. But deep within, you're not outraged anymore.
You are redefining morality.
Yes.
It builds compassion.
Deconstructing morality.
Correct.
All right. So let's bring. So I've I've introduced these philosophical debates in which are of questionable utility, but the point is it's helpful for a seeker, and that's really what it comes down to, right? It's something to reflect on and be disturbed by. It's good to be disturbed. Yeah.
So I had two questions. One is the flow state.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Mikhail's.
Yes. I know what you're talking about. Yes. What a psychologist.
So
yes.
Does that have any correlate with the effects of these practices? Like, is there any connection between that and these practices?
Okay, so remember your second question, and I'll get back to your second question in a second. So what I would say is this. So the flow state, for anyone who doesn't know what it means, it's a psychological term. I'm sure it's been known for a long time in different contexts, but this particular psychologist, Mihaly somebody, coined it. It's kind of a state of absorption in a particular activity where one feels the time is going very quickly. One is totally engaged with the activity, and and you feel like you're doing usually pretty well at it. And this guy basically said it comes from various factors, like the level of the challenge of the activity has to be appropriate relative to your ability, and so on and so forth. And I would sort of put that on a continuum with what I talked about a couple days ago, which is like these sort of zone experiences, right, where one seems to be taken over, right? Musicians or athletes or other skilled people are taken over, like I think Donna mentioned on Zoom, right, this idea of feeling that one is not the doer, or sort of cheeky, I think, mentioned actually, I should say. Anyway, sense of feeling that one is not the doer, that everything is happening effortlessly, and that everything is happening at the highest levels of one's ability. So some people would disagree. I think flow is a little bit less of demanding experience, and the sort of zone experience is a more powerful experience, but they are on a continuum. And what I would say is that that these experiences do have a relationship, okay, to the spiritual, but let me explain what that relationship is. So I think what happens is that when one does a particular activity, okay, let's say whatever it may be, music or martial art or some skilled activity, and one becomes very, very, very inculcated into it, okay, over a lot of time, then one opens oneself up to be able to drop into states of deep absorption. And I think these zone experiences vis-a-vis certain activities would be like a kind of samadhi experience, okay, where one feels like I'm totally merged with the activity is doing me instead of me doing the activity, okay? Yeah, so that's what I would say about that. That does have a relationship because these glimpsey moments are like that, but they're not with respect to an activity, they're with respect to whatever is happening in life at that moment, okay? So these glimpsey moments are also samadhi experiences. They're samadhi experiences that are the samadhis of the practices of inquiry and surrender. So when one enters that samadhi for a second, one has a reflection of the self, and that's a kind of zone experience, but it's not connected to a specific skilled activity. Okay? So we can't assume that just because one experiences these glimpses in the spiritual, that then enables necessarily that one is going to have these experiences in certain skilled activities. They're different. Because one has to build up a certain level of skill to experience that in that particular domain.
Okay.
Now, one more thing I'll just say. Well, one more thing. So these experiences of these sort of samadhi or glimpsey experiences of non-doership, basically, are though they are transient glimpses that cannot be kept going forever because all states end, they are nevertheless reflections of the self. So that means that there's an underlying permanence to them. It's not a permanence of state, it's a description. So which is to say that technically speaking, everything is going on in a state of flow or in a state of zone. There is no doership, really, right? That's the truth, right? Everything is just happening that way. Whether one experiences it in that sense, that particular kind of divine bliss sense of being taken over, that's a state. But the truth of the matter is that the divine is doing everything and everything is happening effortlessly. So in that sense, it's a reflection. Does that make sense?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. So then someone who practices, let's say my music teacher, she has such level of expertise that she can, I'm sure she has gone into that zone, especially when they are being creative, when they are creating alaps and tans and all that, and it feels like she has practiced it so many times that it just flows through her.
Yes.
And if she were to be introduced to the inquiry surrender practice, it might click more easily.
It might, yeah. Well, that's interesting.
Kind of
yeah. Well, you can sometimes bring it across like that to some extent. Absolutely. I mean, I think that's what, for example, in Japan and stuff like that, some of their ideas of the martial arts were like this. You cultivate, and this is even true in India, you cultivate these samadhi states in certain specific domains, okay?
Right.
and then it enables an easier bridge to that in the spiritual, purely spiritual.
Right.
Yeah.
But that
So
is
now
totally
the second,
different, right?
hold on, Geeta. So there was a second question. So this is shifting topic. This whole thing about vasanas and karma and prarabdha karma and all of that.
Yeah.
All of that is in the realm of Maya.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the waking up, it's is it necessary to actually work out everything in order to wake up, or it's only in as far as it allows the practice, like you had said earlier?
Basically that.
Okay.
All you have to do is weaken the vasanas sufficiently. What does sufficient mean? Nobody can say exactly, but yeah, you can't work everything out, and it's not necessary to work everything out. Yeah.
See, when you become jnani, everything is burned instantly. That's what they say. Whatever accumulated vasanas burns.
The meaning of that burning, I would say, is the recognition of their non-existence. You see, they never existed. So because if they really exist, then you can't burn them all. But if they don't exist in the first place, then they don't exist at all. Yeah. So yeah.
So everything is in flow state.
Yes.
Everything is like even what I am saying right now is whatever, it's just something flowing through me.
Yes.
Then the actual Maya then is somewhere the insertion of the doership is what Maya really is.
Yeah, it's the seeming insertion of doership, right? Even the illusion of doership is itself illusory, you know? The illusion is illusory. The illusion is itself an illusion. You see, there seems to be this thing called Maya. There seems to be this thing called Maya. There seems to be someone who's trapped by it. There seems to be someone who is ignorant of the truth. These are all seemings. To whom do they seem? These seemings occur to somebody who themselves is just an illusion. So none of these things are actually happening in the way that they seem to be happening.
Okay.
They don't even seem to be happening, actually. That's really what the case is. You know, so that's...
And that's why the waking experience, Maya actually becomes irrelevant, right, at that point, like once you wake up. As in, like for us, we are struggling with, we have this concept of Maya that we are struggling against, right? And we are struggling with these concepts of free will and waking up and what is illusion, what is real, what is not. It's like there is this struggle that's happening, but my understanding of what you're saying is that once you wake up, that struggle itself is an illusion. Like you see through the illusion of the struggle, even the process of waking up.
Yeah.
Okay. But that's a little difficult because right now we're in dream state. So
that's right.
It's hard for us to wrap our heads around.
That's right.
That aspect.
That's right.
It's like the movie Inception.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yes,
No,
exactly. Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, actually, one second. I think you were saying something, right? You said, you thought it was totally different or something like that.
Yeah. The exercise that, for example, Mandarin scene.
Yeah.
That is totally different, and also it is temporary.
No, it is temporary. You're 100%
Very temporary,
correct.
and also that moment he makes everybody, you feel the
Yes.
The music thing is very different.
It is different. Except it is different, but at the same time, it does share one similarity, which is that at that moment, okay, in that particular narrow context, the mind has become pure and reflective for that moment.
So
that's all.
Hassan was saying, that can even happen. I was talking to him.
Yeah.
You are engaged in a conversation with me.
Yeah.
Even we were so deep, and I am so deep, I'm connected. You can feel that glimpse then also, he said.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that he's talking about the underlying truth of it. Right?
For example, you were so absorbed, you were so into the focus, and then you really see like you get that moment then also. Every activity can bring
have that moment. It's true. That's true. But that's why that's the joy. That's the joy of the practice. You want it to happen with respect to the practice, basically, because you want it. The reason is because only with the practice on, right? You're asking that question at that moment of the reflection is there, and you're asking effectively whose reflection is this? That's the key. That's the key point, right? You know, and you're also destroying the vasanas as you bring it into the realm of, that's very key as well, because, you know, even if a musician, right, did have the moment, the presence of mind to do self-inquiry at such a moment, which they probably wouldn't, because they've lost their mind into the samadhi of that activity. But anyway, even if they could, right, the problem is they probably have a bunch of other attachments that will prevent them from getting clarity. So, you know, but yeah. But yeah, so it is different, but there's just that narrow similarity. Yeah. Of the pure, like temporary purity of the mind, right? So temporarily, the mirror shows the reflection of the self in that particular mode. So, you know, for music, it's in that, conditioned by that, basically. But you know, that's why it's that experience of non-doership in that moment. That's why it feels like I'm not separate. I'm not separate anymore for that moment.
So maybe the expertise is also a key thing.
Yeah, expertise is a key thing.
Expertise
Yes.
Will lead you to that.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly. It's a key. It's a function of expertise, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
You know, people who have these religious trances.
Yeah.
And they say a lot of things, and they probably don't even realize they're saying it.
Yeah, right.
Do they also have this kind of...
I mean, I don't know. I would have to really think about that more carefully. I mean, clearly they may be tapping into some level of creativity, although some of them may be creative and some of them may be delusional. It's hard to say which one is which. Yeah.
Because in India they believe that at that time they're possessed by God, right?
Right. No, I mean, yeah. It's possible some of them tap into something like that,
but in that possessed state, they are not hurt also. They drink even the hot fluid, they walk on the coal. Nothing happens to them.
Yeah, I mean, they may have certain siddhis and other powers like that as a result.
Not siddhi, it's temporary.
Yeah, temporary.
Then they faint on the other side and that's it, they are back to regular guy.
Yeah. Because also, I know, it makes sense.
Right?
It's just like you know, the
psychic mode.
Mother whose child is trapped under a car and suddenly has the strength to pick it up, right?
Something like that,
Something like that.
I have one.
You had a question? Sorry, you had a question? I'll come back to you in a second.
Yeah, I have a question referring to what you had mentioned a little earlier. I understand the concept of illusion, I think. I'm not convinced, or I don't understand that illusion itself is an illusion.
Yeah.
I mean, somehow I think there is an illusion.
Yeah.
It exists.
Yeah. Exactly.
I don't understand that itself being an illusion.
Yeah. Because it's hard for the mind to wrap itself around it. But
it's a recursive phenomenon, right?
Sorry?
It's a recursive phenomenon.
Yeah, because it's recursive, and you can say that it's really to do with again, come back to the same thing about concepts. So, you know, I was talking the last couple of days about how, you see, all concepts, all ideas are rooted in the belief that there is an in here and an out there. First, you have a first division between me and not me. And then that division then allows you to name, give nama rupa, right, name and form to all the not me pieces, okay? Mm-hmm. But if that first division, the first wall between me and not me is fully examined and turns out there is no such wall, then it's like water pours everywhere and inundates all the distinctions that you've made. Because there's no first distinction. This is the metaphor I'm roughly giving. So the concepts that you've created don't hold water. Basically, they don't make any sense. They don't make any sense. So you go out of sense, basically. So the idea that, you know, these are all ideas that we're possessed, we're trapped in an illusion, we're seeking, and then we're going to find. These are all ideas. But the ideas are themselves starting from this basis of this first division. But that first division is not the case. If it weren't for that first division, you would not be able to speak about anything. But that first division isn't the case. So therefore, you cannot speak about anything. All the things that you think you're saying do not have the meanings that they seem to have. And that means that all the talk about people being trapped by illusions, also, none of those have the meanings they seem to have. There is something which is very incomprehensible to the mind about this. No question, I can understand that. You know, you just
because there is this talk.
Yeah.
There's something, right? That's
well, whatever there is not what it seems to be.
Yeah, it may not be. That I agree.
Yeah.
It may not be what it seems to be, but there is something.
Oh, there is. There is. See, even that. The problem is, right? You can say there is, but you can also say, that's a problematic statement because our notion of is conditioned against is not. Is always against is not. Okay, but that's again a division. You know, that division doesn't really hold up because whatever is, when we think of is, okay, we think of a certain, like, it's this and not that, okay, basically. That's what isness means. Here and not there, right? This quality and not those qualities. So we can't conceive of an is without any possible other contrast, basically. That's not a conceptual is. So this is why in the Upanishads it says, right, the self is, technically speaking, beyond both being and non-being, beyond both awareness and non-awareness, both. It's not, so it's beyond both contraries, actually, because all our concepts of what it is are not the same thing, right? Satchidananda, right? Yes, okay, being, awareness, bliss. But the being, awareness, bliss that it's talking about does not exactly map onto the being, awareness, bliss that we normally experience. Why is it said then? Because it's a pointer. It's an approximation. But it's not exactly the same thing. Because for example, right, if we look at deep sleep and waking, okay, in waking, we have the experience of isness in the usual form, which is that we experience things, right? And deep sleep, it feels like we're unconscious, right? So, are things, is there isness in deep sleep? I mean, if there is, which we can say there is, but it's so radically different from the isness in waking that to put them under the same word is not really, doesn't really make sense, actually. It might as well be not isness from our waking perspective. We are not, in some sense, we are not in deep sleep. Now, in a deeper sense, we are, but that R is a different kind of R because, the isness we have in the waking state is conditioned by time and space. What would it mean to be is, but not in time, not in space? That's like so different than we can possibly imagine. Can we still call that is? And so it's not that the real is not it. Fully not in time and space, nor is it in time and space, but rather the real thing, whatever that is, the real self, is that which can give rise to either set of conditions. So it's neither this nor that. It's containing both. That's why it's beyond is and is not. Same thing with awareness, right? Again, waking awareness, deep sleep awareness, radically different. If you want to say there's consciousness in deep sleep, it's obviously of a character which is so extremely different from waking consciousness that it can barely be called the same thing. So, this is what I would say.
But our fear and everything, what we heard, little bit, everything, incomplete things come up in the dreams.
Yeah, in dream things come up, yes, in dream. But I'm talking about deep sleep. In deep sleep, there's no objects. And that the normal observer experience, right, which I say you're trying to investigate in self-inquiry, that normal observer experience is not there in deep sleep. But that doesn't mean the self is not there. What it means is the normal observer experience isn't there. What does that mean? That means the normal observer experience is a thought. That's what it means. Because it comes and goes. See? It's not the self exactly. It's a thought. It's a very special thought. So we are trying to locate that thought. In the process, we're going to detach It's not a normal thought. It's a distortion, okay? It's a distortion, like a distortion in the air. It's not a separate thing. So if you separate it out from its supports, like an illusion, okay, it'll fall apart. Because it depends on adjacent supports to keep the illusion going. So if you detach it from those supports, then it will fall back, and you'll see in some sense, quote unquote, see what it actually is. Okay, let's close out with 5 more minutes of silence. Yeah, and you can do whatever you like.